This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Donald Trump needs a weak dollar.
Have we achieved a soft landing? Has the Fed kind of done its job?
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news.
Fears over a broader regional war in the Middle East.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Lisa Mateo, Michael Barr. Oh, Lisa, can I get 2 aspirin, please? What a celebration yesterday after our 1-year anniversary here. Lisa cut me off after the 4th beverage of my choice.
Yep, I
She said,
understand.
that's it.
Yep.
It's a 2 aspirin morning. It's like a 3-dog night,
Right.
except it's a 2 aspirin morning. We say good morning to all of you around the world on YouTube. We say good morning across. Still frigid, Paul, don't you think?
It is chilly
I think
out
so.
there,
It's like it's not going away.
We're getting above freezing on Sunday here in the New York metro area, Tom.
Good
So
to know.
keep that.
So there's football on Sunday. I wonder
There
if
is, yeah.
It's like the Packers where it'll be like
Yeah, I don't know.
20 below zero. We'll have
Yeah,
to
but they're
see.
hardy folks out there.
We're in the middle of earnings season, sort of after Netflix. Paul, I thought was great on that, really describing that juggernaut. Red and green on the screen, finally. Not up and away, but nevertheless, there it is. BitDog, 102,000. I'm looking at the 10-year real yield, 2.20%. Nudges up a little bit. It'll be good to start, Paul, with Jeffrey Yu here, an extended conversation.
I love talking to Jeffrey Yu over there in London. He can talk about pretty much any market around the world, any asset class. He seems to know it all, so we love getting a few minutes of his time.
We'll have to see. We'll talk to him about Sing Dollar, I guess.
Yeah, let's
I
do
mentioned
that.
it yesterday. Everybody was very impressed. We're going to get started here. Got a great lineup. Adam Posen in the 8 o'clock hour. John Farrow in conversation with the leadership of Morgan Stanley scheduled as well. In 11 a.m. this morning, Steve Schwartzman and Brian Moynihan will be joining Paul Sweeney.
Exactly right. Davos are going to be have a little discussion with President Trump. He'll be virtual into Davos, but they'll have a little conversation there. So we'll bring that to you live.
I mean, if you're there, you go in and there's a big long corridor, and you got to get the president by the espresso bar.
Yep.
And then there's an entourage of security. Then you go up the stairs and you go by Andrew Ross Circuit. Has a little table he sits at, stands at rather. And then you go in there. It takes like an hour and a half to get from the front door into the speech. So we're not going to have that. We're going to be virtual today. Let's get right to it from the Interactive Broker Studios, the Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
You got it. We have futures mix this morning. This is following yesterday's gains on Wall Street. Tech shares retreating. You have shares of NVIDIA supplier SK Hynix. They're falling down more than 2% in South Korea after record quarterly results kind of failed to impress. And that is dragging down ASML, other chip equipment stocks. So you have ASML, those ADRs down more than 2%, and then even Broadcom down 1%. So we'll start with NASDAQ futures down 0.5%, 112 points. S&P futures down about 0.1%, 9 points. Dow futures little changed, up about 41. We have the 2-year yield at 4.29%. That's little change. And the yield on the 10-year, 4.63%, and that's up 1 basis point. To currencies, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is little change. We have the Japanese yen, little change too. Same for the Euro British Pound. We have Bitcoin down about 2% at just over 101,000. To earnings we go. We'll have shares of video game company Electronic Arts really taking a hit this morning, down 14%, cut its full-year outlook due to slowing demand for its soccer games. And then finally, Alaska Air up more than 3%. Top profit estimates, and that was thanks to continued demand for leisure travel and also an increase in corporate sales. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is a trend. We got to get some airline people on here. Helene Becker and
Some good numbers coming out of this
George
industry.
Ferguson and all. I mean, Delta, United,
Yeah,
Alaska Air.
all good numbers.
They're all
Alaska Airlines is the Jerry Garcia airline.
Out there in the zeitgeist right now, and this is a perfect way to bring in Jeffrey Yu, is wait a minute. Markets are going up. Why is everybody so miserable? Joining us now, the king of non-miserable, Jeffrey Yu joins us with BNY Mellon this morning. Jeff Yu, it's out there. You grab it in your iFlow index there's some real caution there as we go up, isn't there?
Well, caution will always happen when we are already at the highs and you're wondering how much higher you can go. And we say this, for the dollar and U.S. exceptionalism on a relative and absolute basis, right? On an absolute basis, dollars, U.S. equities, quite well held above average. But on a relative basis, everyone else is underweight, right? So I think, that's where the convergence really is needed and what's perhaps making people nervous.
Jeffrey, how about this U.S. dollar here? I mean, that was probably when people talked about the Trump trade taking shape several months ago when his poll numbers started to improve. The dollar was top of the list, the strong dollar. How do you think about the U.S. dollar these days?
Well, I'm going to qualify something Tom said earlier, that Trump needs a weaker dollar. I would say two things. Firstly, Trump doesn't need a weaker dollar. Trump needs other currencies to strengthen. And secondly, if Trump needs a weaker dollar, he needs a weaker dollar in real terms, which also means that other currencies, other countries, especially China and Europe, need to reflate better in a sustained fashion, in a healthy manner. So those are the two things. But yeah, those are probably out of his control because that relies on policies elsewhere.
See, this is why we have you, and he's so damn polite.
Yes.
When he wants to go, Tom's wrong, he does it with a grace. This is really important, folks, the asymmetric nature of currency pairs. It's not about a weak dollar. The other's got to get strong, even with dollar stability.
Exactly. So, Jeffrey, is there a call here that the euro, that the yuan, that some of these other major trading currencies around the world can, in fact, improve in 2025, strengthen?
Yes, and on the renminbi side, let's go with that real element. Okay, China hits growth targets, fine. But if you're going to achieve it through having a negative deflator with a soft nominal number, probably not the right way to go about it. What the world needs right now, healthy nominal numbers, and then back to target inflation. But in Asia's case, not just in China, much of Asia, it is about getting those inflation numbers higher as well, and also real income higher, domestic demand higher. Because let's make this clear, if domestic demand is higher, real purchasing power for much of Asia, and I'd add for Europe as well, improves. That automatically brings down the trade deficit that the U.S. is facing, which would suit this administration nicely.
But Jeffrey, I think when I talk to a lot of folks who spend some time thinking about China, I don't hear too many bullish cases for China in 2025.
I think it's an adjustment of expectations, that is needed. And where's your baseline? If you're still comparing things to 8%, 10% growth in the past, well, probably that's going to be a different situation. So it really is about getting real wages up, getting getting inflation higher as well, nominal inflation. And again, I'm going to follow the Chinese bond curve very, very closely.
Well, Jeff, this goes to the little g, Stiglitz's little g, which is the basic idea to the rescue is the growth rate, the first derivative. Are we losing control of the first derivative country to country, or can we state that nations can continue to sustain and grow their economies either nominally or real?
Well, let's decompose growth then, right? So are you relying on NX exports and also government consumption and also private sector consumption? If you look at the OECD's forecast, most countries are expected to see government consumption soften because deficits were high during the pandemic. Asia's on the other side of it. That's the key. Asia never really deployed fiscal in large amounts. So if they actually move towards stronger fiscal resources, deploying them, and let's be clear, they can afford it, then that's a different situation. Growth can be higher, driven by governments. US probably too high on the private side. That needs to rebalance.
It's a huge deal what, Doctor, you just talked about there, folks. The idea here of the fiscal space of Asia, they've been reticent to use it. I'm going to go back to 1998 at least, but that's the bolt-on, if you will, the plug-in, I should say, that everyone's looking for. Jeff Yu with us right now, folks. We welcome all of you. Bloomberg Surveillance, I got a real focus on the United Kingdom. Good noon. Watching over in the United Kingdom and on the continent as well. Jeffrey Yu with BNY Mellon with us this morning. Good morning on a frigid United States commute as well. 99.1 FM in Washington. Jeff Yu, we haven't addressed this. Paul and I have been remiss on this. I thought about you on this. Germany, what is the character and the quality of dominant Germany as a basket case, according to Kristalina Georgieva?
Well, I would actually refute that by saying this is an opportunity for Germany, again, to rebalance, right? So if you're going to try the same thing and try to, again, push on that export to drive growth in your composition, that is not the right way to go about it. But now, looking at the demand, not just for German debt, but for European debt, this is another case. Madame Lagarde yesterday said it. Europe has the talent and the finances to grow out of all this by itself. So we had how much in terms of coverage ratios for the French OAT issue this week alone? 240 billion for Italian debt. Germany, even easier. So adjust the debt brake, and that is what the leading candidates probably will do up ahead, and then start to drive productivity competitiveness again, adopt the letter and also the Draghi report.
For Ned Phelps and his dynamism, can you see a new Europe as Lagarde pled for yesterday?
I think reinvigoration, that is going to be the key there. So it needs to rediscover its competitive edge and also look for new ideas in terms of regulation. But a new Europe means a new growth model, means away from exports, more towards services and more towards productivity. Look at how, and also going back to the fiscal side of things, don't tell me fiscal adjustment cannot be done. Look at Greece, look at Cyprus, look at their fiscal adjustment numbers. Heroic, right? And not in terms of their demographics are much stronger compared to the rest of Europe anyway. So there is a way forward, but these are short, smaller economies, but they play to their strengths. It's time for Europe to find their strengths first and then play to them. And the old adage of maybe that they need to re-identify their strengths, not just being in exports per se, but the drivers behind the exports, as Madame Lagarde mentioned, the talent and also the financing available. So that redirection absolutely is needed.
Is there the political will out there, Jeffrey, for that kind of change? Because I think here, at least in the U.S., we look across Europe and we, look at our good friends in Germany, and we see, such a strong export economy driven by relatively cheap energy. That whole model's been upended again for Germany and to a lesser extent France. Can they reorient?
I think absolutely so. And one difference, I think, if you compare now between, let's say, the last 10 to 15 years, is the external environment has shifted. So maybe, and we can debate this, there is a case that Europe might face more inertia, just based on internal circumstances. But now it's the external pressures, competitiveness, from China, trade relations with US where they weren't in the past, and also on the eastern flank as well. So in that sense, they realize the external environment has changed. And if you don't change yourself, then external environment will change it for you. You'd rather have agency over your change, and I think that's something Europe realizes.
Let's bring it back, Jeff, to the United States. The president is out making executive signature splashes right now. How is this being interpreted, would you suggest, by our allies? What's the Jeff U radar on how Mr. Trump is being interpreted right now as we go to his speech this morning?
Such as the coverage of U.S. politics and constitutionalities, I think there's appreciation that it's more complex than simple EOs. But at the same time, I think the direction of travel is clear. And I think the general message, not just in Europe, but globally, is really pay attention, to the signaling impact of these orders. And of course, the focus is going to be on trade and also, whether there can be, I don't want to use the phrase, deals be done, but also Europe needs to look in itself. What can Europe change to help things adjust naturally? Madame Lagarde mentioned a few speeches ago, yes, buy more from the US, but is there but not just buy more for the sake of it. I go back to my main point, realize higher European purchasing power, a stronger euro in real terms, and that will help increase demand for U.S. goods and drive down the European surplus against the U.S. in a healthy manner organically. And I think that needs to happen more.
Jeff Yu, thanks so much with BNY. We've got to go to breaking news, but Jeff Yu, greatly appreciate it. We began the show with Alaska Air off United Air off Delta Air.
Yep.
American didn't want to participate.
No, I mean, this is kind of a surprise here. I mean, the stock's down 7% here. They're talking about they missed numbers here. They had an unexpected loss in the quarter. Surprise first quarter loss breaking from rival carriers, Tom, cashing in on unusually strong winter demand and pricier domestic fares. American didn't see it. They anticipate an adjusted loss of as much as 40 cents a share in the current period, and that is a surprise here for folks because the analysts had been expecting a 1 cent profit.
I mean, I got revenue up, passenger revenue up, but there's all sorts of other things within 50 headlines coming out now, and the stock down, I think it's 7%, it's down 18 to 17 or something like that. But it's just such a different look than I remember the last paragraph of the Delta announcement. Business, we're killing it. Economy, we're killing it. Delta charge cards, whatever, we're killing it. And I'm not seeing that here.
No, so it's, and we're seeing in the stock here, they were citing some aircraft delivery delays, maybe impacting some of their capacity. We'll, I'm not sure how relevant that is. But again, just a surprise here, because you're right, Tom, the other airlines have been reporting some pretty solid fundamentals across their businesses, both leisure and business, domestic and international. So this was a surprise for a lot of folks.
We welcome all of you across the nation and worldwide as well. The President of the United States to speak at the World Economic Forum meetings here in about 3.5 hours. Paul Sweeney and Alex Steele will bring that to you. And there's questioning within it. And I'm not going to say it's a setup, but one of the great Republican donors, Stephen Schwartzman of Blackstone, will participate in the questioning. Brian Moynihan, with that conversation with John Farrow yesterday with Bank of America, he's going to be careful what he says.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's I think a lot of these CEOs that we saw a lot of them on the days for the inauguration, a lot of technology
Techie
CEOs.
Guys.
Yeah, so trying to cozy up there to this new administration. So we'll see. But again, there'll be a virtual appearance by President Trump in Davos, and we'll bring that to you in the 11 a.m. Wall Street hour.
Anna Botina Santander, who's, I'm going to say, iconic at Davos. She's had a huge commitment there for decades. And from Total, the giant French energy company, Total of Paris, their chairman, Patrick Poyen, will join Brian Moynihan and Stephen Schwartzman. You're going to see that across all of our platforms. I want to alert our YouTube audience. It'll be a great way to see this. I believe, Rich, help me here. Is David Gura going to be sitting in on this with Paul and Alex? Do we know that yet? Do we have? Or we're not confirming that. Gura's people haven't.
I'll see if he walks by. We'll flag him.
We'll flag him in. We'll get him in here. But anyways, that's a big event today at 11 a.m. Wall Street time. And again, American Air with a shock earnings and moving away from the other carriers, declining this morning. Red and green on the screen. Stasis on the VIX 15.31. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. President Trump, as you mentioned, takes center stage in Davos this morning. Trump will be addressing the world's financial elite by video link. Bloomberg's Amy Morris brings us a preview of what global Wall Street is expecting.
People are optimistic in pockets.
New York Stock Exchange President Lynn Martin at Davos says most everyone there is already optimistic about the Trump administration, but they do have some questions.
The geopolitical landscape is probably the biggest one, tariffs in particular, and obviously the knock-on effect of questions around tariffs is going to be inflation.
The forum says President Trump will address the gathering. That will be followed by a dialogue. Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
Thank you, Amy. You can catch the entire conversation at 11 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio and the Bloomberg Podcast YouTube channel. Meanwhile, President Trump downplayed the national security risk posed by TikTok. Trump, in a Fox News interview, implied that TikTok's risk is not the most serious, citing the fact that China makes many other products, including phones and computers, that could also be used for spying. Fire crews are making progress on blunting the threat of an enormous new blaze north of Los Angeles. The Hughes fire has expanded to more than 10,000 acres. Los Angeles County Fire Sheriff Robert Luna.
We have approximately 31,000 people who are affected by our evacuation orders, another 23,000 that are impacted by evacuation warnings.
The fire comes as parched Southern California could get some badly needed rain this weekend. After delays due to the Los Angeles area fires, the 97th Oscar nominations presentation takes place this morning. Actors who could receive top Oscar nods include Ralph Fiennes, Timothée Chalamet, Coleman Domingo, Sebastian Stan, and Adrian Brody. Best Actress possibilities: Demi Moore, Angelina Jolie, Mikey Madison, Carla Sofia Gasson, and Cynthia Erivo. Global news, 24 hours a day, and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. We've been talking a lot about free cash flow. Bill Priest was in. He was in Barron's this weekend. William Priest, just iconic on the development of free cash flow. And Paul, it's not an easy study. I mean, in earnings season here, it's easy for an idiot with a bow tie to go, well, we got to see what the free cash flow is.
Right.
But there's a complexity here to how Company A's free cash flow looks versus Company B's. And I mean, obviously, American Airlines is all messed up.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, I grew up covering the media industry, Tom, and the media industry is all about free cash flow, and as it is for a lot of industries. So, EBITDA less CapEx kind of gets you to a basic kind of free cash flow number, then the question is,
it gets you through lunch. I mean,
exactly.
You can oppress people at lunch.
Exactly. And then the question is, what do these companies do with their free cash flow? Do they pay down debt? Do they make acquisitions? Do they return cash to shareholders through dividends or buybacks? And that kind of comes down to the quality of management. And you can kind of get a gauge to the quality of management to what they do with their free cash flow.
I think you and I disagree on this. I think a buyback is a near equivalent to a dividend.
Yeah.
You don't feel that way.
Well, I personally, what I've seen in historically is a nice mix of a dividend and buyback. I just think it widens your investor base if you have a reasonable dividend policy.
And entrenches your institutional base.
It does now, but for some industries like technology, the signaling effects of a dividend suggest that maybe you guys aren't such a great growth story. If you don't have places to invest it in your own business, you're returning it to me via dividend. Maybe you're not really a great growth story. So that's kind of the challenge some of these technology companies have.
Great set of guests this morning. Again, Adam Posen, the next hour, really anticipating this. A conversation with the leadership of Morgan Stanley from the meetings of the World Economic Forum. We're on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. Good morning, good noon, I should say, to the United Kingdom.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got futures mixed this morning. This is after the S&P 500 closed near a record yesterday, thanks to strong earnings reports, also optimism over artificial intelligence. But this morning, the tech sector seeing a little bit of a pullback. So what exactly changed? Well, you have the information reporting. SoftBank, OpenAI each plan to commit $19 billion of capital to Stargate. That's President Trump's U.S. AI endeavor. But Elon Musk wrote on X that companies involved in the partnership don't actually have the money. So yesterday, shares of companies linked to Stargate were higher. This morning, though, you have Oracle down nearly 2%, NVIDIA down more than 1%, ARM down more than 4%, Microsoft even down 0.5%. We go to NASDAQ futures down 0.5%, 118 points. Dow futures little change, up about 30, and S&P futures down 0.1% or 10 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.29%. That's little change, and the yield on the 10-year 4.64%, and that's up 2 basis points. To earnings we go. Shares of General Electric up more than 5%, and this is after GE Aerospace exceeded those expectations for profit and sales in the fourth quarter. And finally, yes, you've heard about it, a surprise first quarter loss from American Airlines. Those shares down 7%, expects adjusted loss of as much as 40 cents a share in the current period. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. There was some scrambling here at the beginning of the show. We were having Tang mimosas, just carrying on from yesterday's celebration of our one. I spilled it. I had to get Kleenex. And, the Tang is sticky. It's not like orange juice.
I remember from back in the day. It's what the astronauts would say. A little different
than that. I want to do this right now. It's too important. We'll get to Gennady Goldberg, and actually this can fold into what he does at TD Securities. Ian Lingard out right now with a paragraph, this from the Philadelphia Fed, that the number of people making the minimum payment on their credit card accounts, unlike Paul Sweeney, that's actual Fed language.
That is.
Unlike Paul Sweeney, it rose to a record high, almost 11%.
Yeah, that's not
11%
good.
of people only make the minimum.
That is not good.
That's just, you say to your kids,
the
don't
Sweeney
do
offspring
that.
pay it all off. Yeah. So.
And even if you don't pay it all off, you really got to get ahead of it.
Oh, yeah, because it'll just, but the interest rates they charge on those balances, Tom, are just almost usury. It seems
I
like.
haven't seen. Have you seen 30%? I have not
I've
seen.
not seen
the
that.
big
I always
3-0.
think like 21, 22,
20
23.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah, 20
Crazy.
something.
Crazy stuff.
It's
so.
terrible.
Yep.
Ian Lingan, thank you for that. Gennady Goldberg right now joins us, head of U.S. rate strategy, TD Securities. Gennady, what are rates going to do? Could I look to 30, 35%, dare I say 40% charge card yields? Can yields break out higher?
I really struggle to see that. I think you need really three things for that to happen. I would say one is, the Fed has to be expected to hike rates.
Yeah.
Two, tariffs come in a lot higher than anyone expects, even possibly the Trump administration. And really three is inflation really, really takes off. And I think fiscal would have to drive that to some extent. And really, given the slim majority in the House, I really struggle to see that. So if you're looking at the 10-year, I see 5% as kind of a cap in the short term. Obviously, it's hard to see rates go down very materially here, but we are long, and I think these levels are extremely attractive.
So, Gennady, what we think about the Fed here, and boy, the market's been all over the place when you look at the WIRP function, WIRP. It looks like the market's kind of discounting maybe 2 rate cuts this year. How do you guys think about it?
We've got a few more penciled in, but we're really seeing it as kind of a first half, second half type of scenario. In the first half, we actually expect no rate cuts at all. So we do expect the Fed to be on hold starting next week, all the way through the end of June. Then once we get to the second half, we expect the Fed to resume rate cuts. We've actually got 4 rate cuts penciled in. Certainly the timing of that resumption and the magnitude of cuts is something that we'll have to debate. But we do still think there's a lot more room for the Fed to cut. We're not exactly neutral, and we're still in restricted territory, as you were talking about earlier. There's some folks who are struggling.
How do you think about some of the economic policies coming out of the Trump White House as it relates to tariffs, maybe immigration policy? Has that impacted your economic outlook and maybe the way you think about how the Fed's thinking about rates?
Well, I think that's the most difficult part. We're no longer just data dependent. We're to some extent Trump dependent in the rates markets now. We really have to see a lot more of the specifics on things like tariffs, immigration, and fiscal. And quite honestly, we just haven't had a lot of specifics. There is the threat of tariffs against Canada and Mexico. There's the threat of tariffs against China. There's, the expectation that fiscal balances or fiscal deficits are going to be a lot higher. But at the end of the day, we don't know specifics yet. So we're kind of just watching and waiting at the moment in a bit of a limbo.
So on the 10-year, I mean, we sit here at 4.63%. Is 5% more likely, or is 4.25% more likely in terms of the next material move?
I'll give you a range. I think point estimates get everybody in trouble.
Yep.
So I'll stick to ranges. I think 4.25
the
to
wisdom
4.75.
of Gennady Goldberg
Yes,
there.
he's learned.
And certainly don't put a time frame on it. Gennady, continue.
No, I was going to say, so 4.25 to 4.75, I think is where the range is for the 10-year so far. Can we break out to 5? I think it's certainly not, implausible. But I think we're going to have trouble sustaining rates at substantially higher levels from here. I think above 5%, again, unless you get one of those 3 things that I talked about earlier, it's really hard to see. So I do think in kind of this part of the year, in the first 6 months, you're going to get 4.25 to 4.75. And then as you get deeper into the year, as rate cuts get back onto the table, I think, 3.75 to 4.25 on the 10-year is really what you're looking for.
Gennady, bring it down to retail. Do I want a 2-year CD or a 5-year CD this morning?
Honestly, I think you want to buy 5-year treasuries. They've got a great yield. They're government guaranteed. I know there's worries about, fiscal balances and deficits. But at the end of the day, the 2 to 5-year yield curve is extremely flat, I would say. It's quite attractive. So you can lock in very good yields for a very long time.
Yeah. I mean, Gennady, I've got to ask you this because out of Toronto Dominion Bank, heated debate on Looney right now. Audrey Child-Friedman, folks, published moments ago on LinkedIn her call on Looney, and she's looking Canada, Japan.
Really?
looking versus the Japanese yen. She's coming out of Vancouver and looking across the Pacific. Gennady Goldberg, bring over Mark McCormick's work here. What is a TD call on loonie given all the political turmoil in your Canada?
Yeah, I mean, the threat to a weaker CAD still very much exists. I mean, if we've got this kind of Damocles sword hanging over the head of the Canadian economy, it's hard to see CAD really strengthen materially from here unless those tariffs really go away. I think really it's one of two scenarios. Either we get tariffs and CAD continues to soften, or we don't get tariffs and we get a pretty significant correction stronger in CAD. It really is politically dependent.
Right. Can't say enough about TD Securities' call on resilient dollar here over the last couple of years with Mark McCormick. Gennady Goldberg, thank you so much. Rate Strategy United States at TD Securities this morning. Audrey Child-Friedman will be with us later. It's the litmus paper of the system. You wonder if Euro 104, my eyes are failing me, Paul, 104.01.
Yep.
I get the zeros become ones.
Well, Tom, I think you get parity on the euro. We're going to book you a trip back over to Paris or
I definitely.
Parity on the euro.
Celebratory one-year trip.
Yes,
Lisa Matteo.
Sure.
At 30 Rue Montagne.
Oh my goodness.
Lisa Matteo in the cafe. We could do the remote from the cafe at Dior.
Ooh.
I walked in once. They're like, the cafe. They know the show at Dior, and they're very kind. It's really cool. The museum at Dior lease is worth a remote. I hope Sparta or Colin of the Twins are listening.
Yeah, so let's go.
Paris remote.
We've been talking about airlines. Let's book it.
My next remote is to NJIT over in.
There's a remote. Are you taking the Sikorsky to that?
Yes, exactly. That's our next remote.
We say good morning, Audrey Child-Friedman on foreign exchange. Tomorrow, scheduled, always can change, but scheduled, George Saravellos of Deutsche Bank will be with us on a very eventful Friday. Looking forward to getting into the end of the week, and of course with all the political news in Washington folding in an eventful set of Sunday talk shows, like what Margaret Brennan's doing at Face the Nation.
Yep, absolutely. We'll bring that to you, of course.
The politics starts here in 3 hours. The President of the United States, an important speech at the World Economic Forum in Davos. He'll attend virtually, and with questioning, among others, Brian Moynihan of Bank of America, Stephen Schwarzman, an ardent Republican supporter.
Yes, he is.
They line up, I think it's in the 700 block on Park Avenue, and they line up to have Horst divorce at Shea Schwartzman.
Exactly, and in the 8 a.m., just a minute here, Tom, 8 a.m. Wall Street time, Morgan Stanley CEO Ted Pick with our own Lisa Bromwich, John Farrow from Davos. So we'll hear what the good friends at Morgan Stanley are doing. They put up a great quarter, as did a lot of the big New York global investment banks this past quarter.
I wonder if he took Ellen Zentner with him.
Ooh,
she should go
if he's smart, I'd bring her.
And the whole Morgan Stanley team could go as well. Red and green on the screen this morning, the VIX 15.24. Again, the 10-year real yield, Global Wall Street, you got a 2.21% on the 10-year real yield. Thanks to Jeff Yu for the real nominal discussion. Yields here set higher this morning. From New York City, we're on YouTube, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got futures mixed, and this is ahead of President Trump's expected video address to the World Economic Forum at Davos that takes place at 11 a.m. Wall Street time. You have CEOs at Blackstone, Bank of America. They're among some of those executives expected to ask questions. We'll start with NASDAQ futures this morning because they're lower, down about 0.4%, 103 points. S&P futures also lower, down 0.1%, 7 points. Dow futures up 0.1%, 56 points. The two-year yield, 4.29%. That's little change, and the yield on the 10-year, 4.64%, and that's up 2 basis points. We have Brent crude at $79 a barrel, WTI crude $75 a barrel, and the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is little changed. To earnings we go. We start with aluminum producer Alcoa, swung to a quarterly profit, higher prices, but its chief executive did warn that tariffs threatened by President Trump could hit the industry's competitiveness, so shares are down more than 1%. And a few companies making news. Walmart, its regional managers reportedly getting a raise. The Wall Street Journal reporting it will lift their max pay to above $600,000 a year if they get their full bonuses this year. And yes, that next Disney cruise, it's going to cost you more. The company raising its gratuity rates from a base rate of $14.50 per person each day to $16. And those in the fancy suites, they're going to be paying more too. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash.
Repeat this again. What am I giving away at Disney World?
You're having to pay more. Got to pay gratuity, higher gratuity fees.
On the cruises.
On the cruises.
On the cruises.
Yes.
So when you're cruising the Caribbean,
I don't think you'll be on a Disney cruise anytime soon.
You don't see Tom as the
I
demo?
don't see you on the Disney cruise.
Like that's the tip you pay the...
Correct.
They just put it on your bill.
They put it on the bill, yes.
Just to make it nice and easy for you.
So now
You've talked about this. Bill, you get the bill, it's like a hospital bill.
It's unbelievable.
You don't know where it's going.
No.
Could you see Audrey Child-Friedman?
She's not doing a Disney cruise.
She's not doing a Disney cruise.
She's cruising like the Nile or something.
She and I would be having tea at Cafe St. Regis on Ile St. Louis or something like that. Joining us now to save the discussion, publishing moments ago, incredibly valuable on LinkedIn. Audrey Child-Friedman joins us right now with Bloomberg in London with a really wonderful concept take on foreign exchange. Audrey, you as the pro do what we in the financial media don't do. We look at three pairs, euro, yen, dollar. And you say on Canadian, don't look at loonie, the US dollar versus the Canadian dollar. You go to look at the loonie versus the changeable Japanese yen. Discuss that. Why?
Well, Tom, it's very interesting that, this week we've had very much a confirmation in the foreign exchange market that FX will be tariff headline driven early this year, and that's fine. And also a confirmation that the market was probably pricing in a very harsh approach to tariff. And as per now, we need to just wait and see what comes next from President Trump. But what we know is also from that is that this view and this trade of dollar upside on tariff is already priced in, and we're getting some sign and some evidence that there's a little bit of dollar bull fatigue. So this is a good time, I think, to look at other currencies and think, okay, we still bullish the dollar. The narrative hasn't really changed, but we've been saying the same thing for like 2.5 months. The price action is telling me that the upside here is a little bit more hesitant. So let's look at other things. And so far on the tariff front, what we know is that Canada and Mexico are the prime targets initially, and that's very bad news in my currency space. It's very bad news for Canada. The Canadian and U.S. economy are highly integrated. So I'm thinking, which other way beyond dollar loonie can I express the view? And given that I have already a bullish stance on the yen, CAD yen downside seems to be a very interesting way to contemplate that trade. And on top of that, beyond the tariff headlines, we have the BOC and BOJ monetary policy dynamics this week and next week that could add on to the bearish view. So it kind of feels like both sides of the equation could work for that currency pair, and you can still hold on to dollar loonie upside, but it kind of feels like maybe diversifying also kind of makes sense.
Audrey, you mentioned a bullish stance on the Japanese yen. What's the basis for that?
Well, the main basis for that, Paul, has started last year, and it's the monetary policy dynamics. The fact that we have moved away from negative rates, the Japanese economy is growing, inflation is rising, and higher inflation means that we need higher rates in Japan. And we expect a rate hike tomorrow, actually. And we also expect more to come in the course of the year. So the relative yield differential, Japan versus the rest of G10, will be more favorable to the yen this year.
Audrey Child-Friedman, too short today. We have to leave it here with news. But all I can say is we really appreciate your effort from Queen Victoria Street in London. Audrey Child-Friedman driving all of foreign exchange for Bloomberg Intelligence. Red and green on the screen this morning with our news in New York City. Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. President Trump takes center stage in Davos this morning. Trump will be addressing the world's financial elite by video link. He will field questions from several executives. Bloomberg's David Gura.
Stephen Schwarzman of Blackstone is going to ask some questions. Brian Moynihan of Bank of America as well, among others. So I expect there will be questions about trade policy and tariffs from those interviewers, and then they use the CEO of Total Energies as well. So some questions, I'm sure, about drilling too.
Bloomberg's David Gura. You can catch the entire conversation at 11 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio and the Bloomberg Podcast YouTube channel. The House has passed the Laken-Riley Act with bipartisan support. 46 Democrats joined all Republicans in passing the measure that detains undocumented immigrants charged with crimes, including violent offenses. Republican Congressman Mike Bost of Illinois was at the chair for the final vote tally.
In this vote, the yeas are 263 and the nays are 156. The bill passed. And without objection, the motion to reconsider laid on the table.
The bill has already passed the Senate, and it now goes to President Trump's desk. Fire crews are making progress on blunting the threat from an enormous new blaze north of Los Angeles that forced students to evacuate and prompt inmates to shelter in place. The Hughes fire has expanded to more than 10,000 acres, but the blaze is now 14% contained. Global news 24 hours a day, whenever you want it. With Bloomberg News Now, I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Thanks so much, Michael Barr. This came in. Thank you so much, folks, for attending to New York City. Good morning, Bloomberg 1130. Paul, finally, St. John's is back.
Yeah.
A guy named Patino from Louisville is doing the magic.
He's really doing the magic. I mean, they're 16-3. I was just listening to John Stashower's sports report. They're 16-3, and their 3 losses combined by 5 points. So just extraordinary. They're ranked number 20th in the country. So they're a national story again, which they were back, when we were all kind of in the 80s, kind of growing up in the Big East was the thing in college basketball, Georgetown and Syracuse and all that. So you got UConn, which has been back-to-back national championships, and now you got St. John's.
I mean, he came here for a 50% pay cut from basketball crazy Louisville. Why did Rick Pitino come to Division I St. John's?
Well, I think he's a New York guy. He was up at, I believe, Ari, you can correct me here, Iona or some of the local. Yeah, he was at Iona for a few years after, playing in the, coaching in Kentucky and Louisville and all that kind of stuff. So he's back in the New York City area, and he was very content at Iona. He's lived on the golf course at Westchester Country Club, very happy. And the question was, why would you get back into big time basketball at St. John's? And he says, I'm a basketball coach. It's what I do. And he saw the challenge, and I think he appreciates. He started at Providence College way back in the day, the Big East. So he's a Big East fan, and he said, I remember when St. John's was the bomb. I think we can get back there. So let me see what I can do there.
Doesn't he have a huge recruiting advantage? Because the kids from New York, their parents can come every day and watch him.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, he's been a winner in the pros, in college. He's won everywhere he's been, and he's just a thing. So if you want to be a star, you want to play big-time hoops, St. John's is now a place to go.
Thank you. I got on your commute across the nation. Good morning, Chapel Hill. This is from Chapel Hill. Just David from Chapel Hill. Just grateful this is distracting Paul from talking about Duke.
Exactly.
Duke's got the same record. I mean,
Duke's 16-2. They're ranked number 2 in the country, and number 1 is Auburn. Auburn's 17-1. Who beat Auburn at one time? Duke. So Duke's
Okay.
going to win it all this year, kids.
Okay, we can. Lisa, I, and Michael could stay around.
Carolina might not even make the tournament. They got to win the ACC tournament just to get in.
Okay, fortunately, we have to go to break. They're going to be turning off. They're going to be turning off the radio in Chapel Hill. This is fun. We'll really climb on board the St. John's view here, going to March Madness. Red and green on the screen this morning from New York City. Bloomberg surveillance.
Now a look at the front pages.
What's making news around the world?
Your daily roundup of today's headlines on Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, and Lisa Mateo.
I say good morning to you. And of course, front pages, it's the Lisa Mateo Hour, brought to you by IBKR Financial Advisors. Switch to interactive brokers for lowest cost, global trading, and turnkey. Custody solutions, no ticket charges, no conflicts of your interests. Learn more at ibkr.com/RIA. Lisa, what do you have this morning?
All right, this one actually is some good news. So a new study says college enrollment rebounded since the pandemic. This was a study, the National Student Clearinghouse Research Center. So the data says undergraduate enrollment neared 16 million in the fall of 2024. But this really stood out. Freshman headcounts grew 5.5%. A big part of that enrollment of students over the age of 21. So not sure if those who were putting it off are now going back. And then the traditional freshmen that come right out of high school, a lot of them, the biggest rate were from students from low-income neighborhoods, particularly community colleges. But what really stands out to me is this is the time where that FAFSA form was such a headache. It was such a nightmare for parents. And despite all that, the college enrollment is still going up.
And because it comes at a time when people really are questioning the value of a college education, given the cost. Is it worth the debt that a lot of kids have to take on to get that degree? Is it better to go to a trade school or to do some other path?
Or the community college route.
Community college route, exactly.
I don't look at Reddit too much, but the little bit of the Reddit feed that comes in to my email feed, the angst of kids having to pay these tuitions, 60, 70, 90,000 a year. Sometimes it's out of control.
It is. And there's a article in the Terminal too, if you look it up, that says financial aid is increasing. So hopefully that's going to help. But my daughter's on the college hunt. We've been to open houses and they are packed. Like the officials, the administrators are saying this is like some of the highest rates they've seen at open houses.
It
is. It is exactly.
Maybe some kids took some time off.
Okay, this is also post-COVID thing. The Wall Street Journal has this article here. The screens are taking over classrooms, right? Kindergarten through high school. But educators are starting to wonder and question if this is really helping or hurting kids' learning. So there's a debate, right? The teachers saying that they help create more engaging lessons, but then you have others are saying it's distracting. It's burning out teachers because now teachers have to find a way from stopping students playing the online games and watching videos in between when they're in the classroom. So they're saying it's distraction. Parents are trying to take their kids, opt out of technology. Some students are just tired of it in general. So it just shows this debate.
Do you think you learn the same? Do you think, like I have trouble taking an exam on the screen. I flunked the last 30 Bloomberg exams, but do you think you retain as much off an iPad? I don't think so.
I think when I write, I retain it better.
That's my
Yes,
view.
I totally agree with that. And I keep trying to, tell my daughter, like, she's still doing the flashcards and writing it out. And, because I feel like it helps you remember it a lot better than
for each company I covered on Wall Street for 30 years, I had a notebook for each company for all my notes, for all the earnings releases. So I had like 50 notebooks for Disney, 50 notebooks for... And all my notes are done. I felt like when you wrote it down, but that's just me. Maybe it.
Can we do a 5-second audible?
Yep.
Yes.
Afterthought just got our best report card.
Oh, good.
She passed Jim.
Yes. There you go.
No Chromebook
There
needed.
is hope.
Yes.
Continue.
And this one I found interesting because remember Tuesday when Larry Ellison, co-founder of Oracle, shared the stage of White House President Trump, they announced that Stargate deal. Well, now sources are telling the New York Post that backing, it could save his son David Skydance Media to gain that approval that it needs to merge with Paramount. They're saying maybe that's some of the reason behind it. Paramount also considering settling a $10 billion lawsuit President Trump filed against the company over bias ahead of the merger. So that kind of stood out when he stood up there.
Yeah, there's no regulatory problem for Skydance buying Paramount, but to the extent that there's any litigation out there, maybe currying favor with the president's not the worst thing. We've seen it time and again.
Yeah, Lisa Mateo, thank you so much on the newspapers. Thank you, IBKR. Robert Clearmountain, Bob Clearmountain, lost everything in the fires, including his Bosendorfer piano. This is one of the songs that came out of his magic, his pixie dust. Brian Adams.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
What do you say to people scared stiff in cash?
We've got an administration, presumably, that will be pro-business, lower taxes.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
AI affecting demand for cloud computing.
And Michael Barr with news.
The president is focused on geopolitics.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Bloomberg Surveillance on YouTube across the nation. Good morning, good noon to the United Kingdom and to the continent of Europe as well. On YouTube, in your office, at home as well. Please subscribe. Bloomberg Surveillance this morning brought to you by Cohn Resnick Advisory Assurance Tax. With potential changes on the horizon, will you need to rethink your tax strategy? Cohn Resnick Tax Advisors can help keep your business at the forefront. We thank Cohn Resnick for heritage support as well. Red and green on the screen of VIX 15.20. Right now, from the Interactive Broker Studios, a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Yeah, and Tom, that's following yesterday's gains on Wall Street. Tech shares starting to retreat. You had shares of NVIDIA supplier SK Hynix falling down more than 2% in South Korea after record quarterly results really failed to impress. That's dragging down ASML, other chip equipment stocks. So you have ASML ADRs down more than 2%. Broadcom down about 1%. NASDAQ futures down 0.4%, 99 points. Dow futures down 0.1%, and S&P futures, they are little changed. The 2-year yield, 4.29%. That's a little changed, and the yield on the 10-year, 4.64%. That's up 3 basis points. To earnings, want to point out airlines, because on one hand, you have Alaska Air up more than 4%, top profit estimates thanks to that continued demand for leisure travel and corporate sales. But then you have American Airlines breaking the trend. Surprise first quarter loss up to 40 cents a share. Their shares are down about 8%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. Here in 2 hours, make it 3 hours, we're going to have the President of the United States speaking to the World Economic Forum meeting. I've witnessed the only time in 20 years there, Paul, I saw the valley stop was the first President Xi's speech.
Okay.
Literally, you could feel 3,000 people in Happy Valley stop. I wonder if we're going to see that today. I wonder if it's going to have the same intensity.
Yeah, I think the fact that he's not there physically will dial that down a little bit.
Yeah.
But clearly, as we've heard from Jonathan Ferrer, Lisa Abramowitz, and on Bloomberg reporting over there, that has been topic number one in Davos is, what does the second President Trump term mean for the United States and for its trading partners and global Wall Street?
I mean, to me, Paul, what's so interesting here within the tariff debate, and I'm going to go back to the laureate Paul Krugman and folks, tariffs in international economics is Professor Krugman's wheelhouse. There's not a lot of debate among economists over tariff 101, if you will. What it's about is the magnitude of the tariffs. And we still, that's a mystery, I would suggest right now.
I think you're right, Tom. I think if you look at the financial markets, stock markets, bond markets, currency markets, people are kind of questioning just the timing of the tariffs, how quickly will they come, and the magnitude of the tariffs. And then the question is, are they really there, are going to be in a size that really impacts global economies, or are they more of a negotiating tool for President Trump and his administration to try to extract some, accommodations on other economic policies? So we'll have to see how that plays out. But, all the pros we talk to, Tom, in the markets, they're kind of in a wait-and-see kind of mode here to see how this plays out.
Date calendar and Nassar just met on the equity market. She's completely wired into the dynamics of the market. Professor Schiller from Brown on this moment for President Trump speaking to the World Economic Forum. I believe you or Michael Barr mentioned earlier, he's done this before.
Yes. Exactly.
I mean, I think I have a memory. I came out of the piano bar, and there was President Trump in, I think, 2018. In conversation now with Jonathan Farrell and Lisa Abramowitz at Davos, Ted Pick of Morgan Stanley.
Yeah, let's
well,
restart.
You're sort of like,
all right, let's restart.
I was like, okay, this is, I'm like filler.
We're
going back to T-shirt. All right, you ready? That wasn't live. This is the real thing.
Okay.
Live from Davos, Switzerland at the World Economic Forum, the big event. Ted Pick, the Morgan Stanley chairman and CEO.
Fantastic.
Good to see you,
guys.
sir. 1 year in the seat.
Yes.
It's flown by, hasn't it?
1 year and 3 weeks.
How's it feel?
Amazing.
Yeah.
You come into this job and you want to do good, but what you discover is the quality, the underlying franchise and the people, and it's a wonderful franchise. They got the keys to a great car, and the partnership is alive and well.
Now you've got to hit the ground running.
Yeah.
American bankers running around CEO, very, very, very happy here in Davos, Switzerland, these CEOs and American bankers. Are you one of them? Are you optimistic about this year ahead? And what is it about the incoming administration that gives you that confidence?
Jonathan, I am positive because it is definitely a change in tone. It just feels like the overall framework is one where there's going to be more interaction between the public and the private sectors. What you guys were talking about the last couple of minutes, it can't be state actors alone, and it can't be private companies alone. So the fact that there's real dialogue building, I think that's a huge plus. And on the European question, sort of interesting comment, too, because I think there may be some catalyst to some now reflection. There were the Draghi papers. Did people read it? They kind of read it, but there was nothing. Capital Markets Union, Banking Union, kind of European sort of self-strength. Maybe this is a catalyst to some real conversation. So in that sense, I think it's positive, too.
Are you hearing about actual business activity stemming from that change in tone in Europe, or is it just sort of a conversation at this point?
Well, I mean, we're like, 25 basis points into the new administration, right? We're just getting going. But, yeah, a hell of a lot more than you would have expected 2 or 3 weeks ago. I think it's, it's constructive.
One thing in your earnings that really stood out was the stock trading revenues that really boomed. And I'm wondering, this has been a discussion about how risk-on things have been feeling, certainly at Davos, but through the last couple of months. Do you see that waning at all, or is it just continuing to amp up in terms of risk-taking?
Well, when you become a CEO, one thing is for sure all of your children are equally beautiful, but our equities business is one of our more beautiful children that I adore. And yes, they put up some great numbers. And I think that is a reflection on just the quality of the underlying franchise, but also a sense that people want to allocate to a little more risk. But importantly, they kind of want to get beyond the index level. You guys talk about this a lot, right? Sort of index level equity risk premium relative to sectors. And I think one of the positives here is we're talking about deregulation in the energy space and energy transition. We're talking about the financial services space. And yes, you need to own the 6 because they are money machines and great companies. But how about the rest of the 493, 494? And I think some of that dispersion getting kind of allocated across names and sectors and around the world, I think that's a multi-year trend. I think we're early on that.
Concentration is certainly a risk factor that a lot of people are considering. Another one is the deficit and the cost of interest payments for the U.S. government. For you, for the capital market business, is that a risk more generally that you and the team are focused on? Yeah,
you've been talking about that a lot, and I'm sort of, and I think it's important because if you don't talk about it, it sort of says, there's no canary in the coal mine, right? But I do think there is the fact that there has been so much attention given to this, and you have folks like Besson coming in who know the bond market, that it has a sort of reaffirmation that we got to look out on that. Simpson Bowles, here we are these years later. That having been said, term premium is still pretty narrow. So, we haven't seen the long bond really move. So there's an underlying confidence. I think the question is, what kind of growth can we generate? I think so the conversation that one would have is, which comes first, sort of the potential inflationary effect of tariffs or the positive deregulatory effect? And I think that's going to be one of the things we know is that there's going to be an ongoing dialectic, which policy function can be transmitted more quickly than the other. And I think that pivoting and transitioning and the dialogue is important.
Do you think it holds back activity? That degree of uncertainty, given how confident everyone is, and Lisa especially, me too, we get nervous when everyone in Davos gets really confident.
Yes, contraindicator.
Does it hold back activity without having the clarity on what these changes are going to look like?
I think part of the dilemma is that the vernacular of whether we're really moving with animal spirits is whether we see a bunch of M&A prints. Like, where are those M&A announcements? And the reality is, over the last number of years, we've had, I think, two major uncertainties, right? The end of financial repression, 0 and 0, is that finally passes? And do we kind of know where rates are going to be? And we can focus on the detail of whether there'll be, one or two moves or none at all. But at least we generally know that for the next period of time, the U.S. risk-free rate is somewhere in the mid-4s. And then you can apply discount rates for country risk and the company and the rest of it. So that's kind of past us. So that's an uncertainty that's taken off the table if you're a CFO and you're in a boardroom. The second set of uncertainties has been around sort of the end of history, which is the resumption of nation states and the like. And one could argue, well, there's a lot of uncertainty in the world. I would argue the combination of having some sense of a rate framework and having some sense that things are going to happen in the U.S., in Europe, around the world, I think it galvanizes the corporate community. And so the question is, how much is the market discounted at? How fast will that be? And I do think important catalyst to this will be there are the better part of 1,900 companies in the private equity space that have $1 billion of aggregate value, 5 years of life on average. Those companies need to move. So at some level, I couldn't tell you exactly the pacing of that activity, but we've been below trend line in the M&A market. We talk a couple years from now, I think we'll be a trend line or higher. I'm pretty confident about that.
You think it's going to be M&A? You think it's going to be IPOs?
I think it'll be everything. I think we've been talking about, you've talked about so much the sort of paucity of investable names, especially when you get past the big 7 companies and they're sort of small cap orphans without research. I think there's yes, it can be painful, Starbucks, for a young company to be public, but you get enduring long-term value from shareholders that actually can also add some value, and you can use that currency to make other acquisitions. I think the IPO product is alive and well, and I think importantly, what's happened is a sort of financialization of the markets is the intersection of private and public. That's come of age. So maybe you don't go public in the classic NASDAQ, New York IPO at the first. Maybe you do some hybrid capital for a while, and then you go public a la Uber with a full capital structure.
One area that you've brought in, one of your babies that's very beautiful that I'm sure you talk about, is your wealth management unit. And
yes,
I'm curious
that's
about...
a big baby.
It's a big baby.
Big, beautiful baby.
It was one of the drivers of revenues for a very long time. What's been the challenge in accumulating assets in the wealth management, growing assets to the degree that you really have wanted to?
Well, you have a massive denominator, right? And I think what's happened is we're now the better part of $8 trillion of AUM between wealth and investment management. If you look at sort of point to point, what have assets done, and obviously higher markets helped, the assets in 1 year went up by $1.3 trillion. So people say, okay, you raised 250. Well, that's a huge number. And for me, Lisa, what's really important is, how is our funnel working? Like, think about our wealth business as sort of having 3 parts. Self-directed E-Trade, we're seeing transaction activity really kicking up. That's clearly a positive signal, part of what you were asking about in the sort of pure equity space. We have this workplace business. I want your stock plan business, because then I can do factory floor to CEO. And then the fee-based advisor, 50 basis points per annum. And the fee-based advisory growth is quite impressive, and is going to continue for years to come, especially if clients need to allocate across sectors.
You've made a lot of acquisitions in the past. Any in the pipeline, planning any further types of tie-ups yourself?
You know, it's interesting. We see stuff, but I really love the durable growth organically that we have in the two major businesses, the investment bank and the wealth and investment manager. But over time, we'll continue to look at stuff as we accrete capital. Sure.
We've got 1 minute left.
Yes,
I want to
sir.
squeeze this in. Have you spoken to the president?
I have not.
Not recently?
Right.
If you had the opportunity to, and Davos will today, to throw a question at the incoming president, the current president, Donald Trump, what would you ask him?
I like the quality of the questioners you have. I do. I like the quality of the questioners
If your
you
name
have.
was in the mix and you had one, what would that question be?
He tried to punt by saying he's not going to do it.
I think the question I would ask is one where it would give him the opportunity to sort of speak to the possibility that he's thinking about a lot of different possibilities on a lot of different issues. Something along the lines of, are you open to taking idea flow around a whole bunch of different spaces and give examples? And I think my guess is the answer that he would give is yes, and I'll give you examples of that. And the reason that's important is because I think we're so early in this administration. People are trying to sort of weigh how much is tactical versus how much is baked. I think there's a lot of discussion, and people, it wouldn't be so much for him, but people understanding that there's a real conversation taking place on a whole bunch of important issues, and we're only 5 days in. I think people hearing that will give confidence that we are in the early stages of the dialectic, and there's more to come.
Ted, appreciate your time. This was a
Thank
great
you so much for having me,
conversation.
guys.
Thank you, sir. Safe travels back
Ted
to New
Pick
York.
with Morgan Stanley, with John Farrow and Lisa Abramowitz. Mr. Pick, classic non-finance guy. Russian history and politics at Middlebury, wandering over to a job at Morgan Stanley and building that out into his leadership as CEO of Morgan Stanley. We move from Ted Pick to this speech this morning, and of course the international economics personified by Adam Posen. He is leadership at the Peterson Institute, arguably the toughest act to follow in think tanks. He's done yeoman's duty there, and we're thrilled he could summarize all the academics at Peter Institute. Dr. Posen joins us this morning. You have the advantage of a shocking set of quality, Adam, in international economics. I see Warwick McKibben and Marcus Nolan, the giant Marcus Nolan, writing about tariffs. The Adam Posen summary, if we get a certain magnitude of tariff, what does it mean for our listeners and viewers?
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for monitoring our work. And the new piece by McKibben and Nolan is the latest best thing on what a tariff concentrated on China, Mexico, Canada would do. I think your viewers, your listeners should think about three sets of magnitudes. First is negotiating tool, small, for the most part, limited to a bunch of countries, but not all across the board. That's annoying, a burden on U.S. households, not a huge deal macroeconomically or market terms. The second level is what they're talking about, which is potentially putting on tariffs across the board at 10 or 15% across almost all countries, almost all industries. That's a genuine large tax increase, and it's a particularly distortionary tax increase. That's going to be meaningful inflation for American households, and it's going to be more like shortages felt in a lot of areas. So it's not just a question of what percentage of what part of the economy, and that's part of what the modeling we at Peterson and others are trying to do, is tease that out. That also is a world in which you get retaliation, almost certainly from China, Europe, Canada, Mexico, everybody. And that's a world in which everything shrinks. Sorry, third last version. Right. They overdo it, we get a recession.
I look at him at the work here, folks. I really want to emphasize the academics here of, say, William Klein at Peterson was foundational to moving away from President Trump's unilateral and bilateral, as Paul would say, transactional discussion. And William Klein said, we don't understand the multilateral ramifications of what we do. What would William Klein say, Adam Posen, about the multilateral impact of these tariffs?
Well, I hope you'll have Bill on soon. But the fact is, this is reversing 90 plus years of history in which the U.S. has, both as enforcer and as exemplar, said you don't get rich by closing your markets. And other countries have cheated, and it's mostly harmed them more than it's harmed the U.S., certainly, and more than it's harmed the rest of the world. But in general, we've gone to a world where for the last 25 years, the rest of the world keeps integrating and opening, even China. And the U.S. has been standing still on terms of integrating and opening. And so this now tips us backwards. And, this is a world where things are going to be more expensive. Innovation is going to be less widely shared. Conflict and uncertainty for business investment is going to be up. And the developing countries of the world will be getting more shut out, except for the few very big ones like India and Brazil. And in the end, it's not going to serve any of the goals that President Trump claims he wants. It's not going to close the trade deficit. It's not going to weaken the dollar. It's not going to lead to better U.S. technology. It's not going to lead to more than a few 100,000 more manufacturing jobs at most. And it probably is going to lead to inflation.
Adam, given that backdrop here, what's your view of China these days, and given the challenges they face and given kind of some of the policies we're starting to see coming out of the Trump administration, how do you view China?
No, you're absolutely right. Again, in the same spirit of it's a general equilibrium, other people exist world. China's got deep, deep problems. And you and I started talking about this, 18, 20 months ago when I was writing Foreign Affairs, that China has economic long COVID. It's not just a real estate problem. It's not just that they're going through a short-term downturn. This is fundamentally about demographics and distrust of the government and Xi pushing too far with intervention. Leaving aside what I know you've talked about in this program many times, the irony of the U.S. emulating China just as China is blowing itself up. The real issue is, does this make them more desperate to dump goods on the rest of the world if the U.S. shuts them out? Does this make them more desperate to pursue self-sufficiency, which will be a vicious cycle downwards for them, but also encourage the U.S. and others to shut up their markets? I think the bottom line is China, there's a lot of ruin in China, especially in a communist-run state, but they're not going to be growing anything like what they were growing at, and their moves towards so-called self-sufficiency are hurting them.
So, Adam, is globalism dead, or is it just kind of on pause here?
I think it was on pause. I think we're going through a setback, but it's not dead. One of the most important things about globalization, meaning not just trade, but the crossing of people, ideas, goods, investment, capital across borders, is it's always been with us. You go back thousands of years. In ancient China and ancient Rome, they were trading with each other. You go back hundreds of years, and even in the Middle Ages, even in the times of backwardness, there was a great amount of trade and interaction because the gains are so large, because people want variety, they want new ideas, they want entrepreneurship and possibility. I don't mean to get teary-eyed, but this is the reality. So nobody's going to kill globalization. What they are going to do is make things bad for them.
Adam, I actually traveled with this. I think I read a couple chapters at Jackson Hole. Doug Irwin and Maurice Obstfeld, floating exchange rates at 50. I got way too much peace, love, and dope on the show right now. Nobody's looking for Ecuador. Nobody's looking for Mexico. Do you and the team at Peterson feel, not to harp on 1998, but are we set out there for the headaches that Stanley Fischer faced in the 90s?
I think, Tom, it's good to be looking at these historical analogies, but I think we're set out there for the headaches that were faced in the 80s. That the U.S. gets so caught up in this mismatched macro policy of loose fiscal, belatedly tight money, and a huge upward dollar cycle that just continues. And that leads to debt crises around the world. Now, again, India, Brazil, possibly Mexico, depending on how badly Trump treats them, Indonesia, Turkey, now that it's getting its act together, the largest EM are actually going to do okay, especially in a world of geopolitics. But the rest of the developing world, almost all of Africa, South Asia outside of India, Central America, large parts of South America outside of Brazil, these are going to be suffering, as the IMF and the World Bank keep talking about, that there's huge amounts of debt that just keeps accumulating because there's not the growth, not the option. And as Ngozi, the WTO keeps talking about, open trade is the way to development for these countries and the world shutting down.
Adam, one final question. Speaking of trade, do the Red Sox have a prayer? I mean, did they participate in the off season?
It's amazing, Tom. I know you keep track of the Bruins and everything. Watching the Celtics, watching the New England Patriots actually have a revival of hope, and seeing the Red Sox just sort of go, I don't get it. I don't get it.
Did you buy any Walker Buehler merch yet?
No, not yet.
Adam and I are on the same page on this. Dr. Posen, thank you so much. The gentleman from Brookline, Massachusetts, Adam Posen, of course, what a job at the Peterson Institute, the set of academics. We'll try to get William Klein on. He's one of my heroes here with immense multi-decade experience as well. Red and green on the screen. Paul, that was interesting.
That was. About
the magnitude of tariffs and the what we don't know right now.
Yeah, so again, we're waiting for timing of these tariffs and the magnitude of these tariffs. I think that's kind of what the markets are saying to us right now.
You think Elon Musk is involved in that discussion?
I think so. I think so. We'll see.
Well,
for how long?
Dollar stronger. It's an odd screen after the enthusiasms of the last couple of days. I don't want to pull away from that. It's still there. Dow actually green. NASDAQ only down 0.5 percentage point. So it's not like a pull. It's a sort of kind of like pullback. Am I right on that?
It's okay.
Like, yeah.
We'll take a little break here.
Do we have economic data here in 7 minutes? I haven't even
jobless
looked.
claims coming up here at 8:30.
Claims Thursday, yes.
Absolutely.
Please, I missed that.
It's Thursday. We forgot.
The Kansas City Fed Manufacturing Index.
I'm on it. We'll be on it. 11 o'clock. We'll bring that to you. Why not?
Chiefs, it's probably chief skewed and all that as well. Why don't we do this? Let's go to Lisa now, a Bloomberg Business Flash from the Interactive Broker Studios. Lisa Mateo.
You got it. And this Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by Oracle. Attention growing businesses. Oracle offering to cut your current cloud bill in half if you move to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. For new U.S. customers with minimal financial commitment, offer ends March 31st. See if your company qualifies at oracle.com/Bloomberg. All right, you're right. Yeah, we do have a mix of red and green on screen. This is after S&P 500 closed near a record yesterday. That was thanks to a few things, strong earnings reports, but also optimism over artificial intelligence. This morning, though, a pullback in tech. Yesterday, you had shares of companies linked to President Trump's AI endeavor, Stargate. They were higher, but this morning, you have Oracle down nearly 2%, NVIDIA down more than 1%, ARM down more than 4%. So let's start with NASDAQ futures. They're lower, down 0.5%, 109 points. S&P futures down about 0.1%, 8 points. Dow futures, little changed, up about 30. The 2-year yield at 4.29%, that's little change, and the yield on the 10-year, 4.63%, and that's up about 2 basis points. We are about 5 minutes away from more economic data. A few moments away from this is initial jobless claims for last week. We will bring those to you as soon as they come in. For now, let's go to earnings. We have shares of video game company Electronic Arts really taking a hit this morning, down 16%, cut its full year outlook, slowing demands for its soccer games. And finally, shares of General Electric up more than 8%. Its GE Aerospace actually exceeded those expectations for profit and sales in the fourth quarter. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. Claims coming up here in 4 minutes. Ted Pick, just brilliant in Davos. Why was he brilliant? Because he reads Sarah Wolfe.
Of
That's
course,
why.
absolutely.
Sarah Wolfe joins us now. Mr. Pick starts every morning listening and reading his thematic and macro investing team at Morgan Stanley as well. You're sitting having a beverage of your choice with Mr. Pick. What do you say about tariffs? Am I right that this is a study of magnitude more than anything else?
It's a study of magnitude and it's a study of timing. If we look back to
the x-axis.
The x-axis, of course. If we look back to the 2018-2019 tariffs and you read the transcripts among the FOMC participants, they were broadly looking through the tariffs, right? That it was a one-off price effect, that it wasn't going to be inflationary over the longer run, and they were more worried about the following hit to growth after the tariffs. Can we do the same thing this time? Not necessarily. It's a little bit more complicated.
Why?
If we're phasing in tariffs over the course of this year, it's going to be a lot more difficult to discern the effects of tariffs versus the effects of, just real inflation. It's also going to be a price level increase that's occurring over a longer period of time than normal. So it's going to be more inflationary than what we saw back in 2018, 2019. And so the Fed might be in a position where they're going to have to take cuts off if that's the case, or not cut at all, and kind of be on hold until they see all the tariffs play out and what it means for economic activity.
So the Fed's really going to be looking at this tariff news coming out over the next several months.
Yeah, I mean, right now we were thinking that tariffs were going to be more of a back half of 2025 story and start to phase in. But as we heard from Trump in the last couple of days, February 1st, we could already be seeing tariffs on China, tariffs on Mexico and Canada. Mexico and Canada we're watching very closely. That could be pretty detrimental to U.S. manufacturing. Our auto supply chains are incredibly interlinked with Canada up in the north. Computers, electronics, all that type of manufacturing. And so not only is 80% of Mexico and Canadian trade with the U.S., but 20% of our trade is with them as well. So this is a bigger deal.
So on a game theory basis, down at Laredo, I've actually been there, folks, at the border, at the Windsor Bridge over to Detroit's where the horde comes over from Ontario to watch the Detroit Lions and the Detroit Tigers. On a game theory basis, they're going to respond. Then what do we do?
So I think this is all going to be a game leading up to the renegotiation of the USMCA, right, which is in 2026. And so if we put tariffs on Canada and Mexico, they retaliate and put tariffs on the U.S., and that's going to hurt U.S. economic activity. And then I think probably within 6 months to a year, we pull back the tariffs, and that helps the U.S. get some of the things that they want out of Canada and Mexico as we go into 2026 negotiations. So what does the U.S. want, right? They want Canada and Mexico to be stricter on immigration from their side of the border. They want the countries to be stricter on fentanyl, so drugs entering the U.S., and they want to be stricter on Chinese foreign direct investment that's filtering through Mexico and then back into the U.S.
So has all of this from the Trump administration, from the election, has it changed your view of kind of the economy, how to invest, where to invest? Has it changed your thematic view?
It definitely has. I mean, we're looking for more diversification. We think that valuations are a little bit bloated right now for the U.S., and there's some downside risk to economic activity. We should be looking to diversify, possibly in Europe. There's some big policy changes happening in France, Germany, and the U.K. this year. We also are looking to emerging markets for opportunity. And so we do think that even though there is this story of U.S. exceptionalism, that things are a little bit too expensive here. The other thing we're looking at within U.S. stocks is to be selective. So the consumer, for example, which we talk a lot about on the show, internationally sourced consumer goods are going to have a tough year between a strong dollar, between tariffs. And so consumer services might be a nice place to hide again for 2025.
Our place to hide is with the jobs report coming in now. This is the initial jobs claims. It's weekly data. Some people find great value from it, others don't. And once again, pretty much on plan. 217 last time. I don't have a revision. We were looking for higher claims. This is a CFA word. Worser claims.
Worser.
220. Comes in a little bit worser than worser. 223 is claims. Sarah Wolfe with us right now. It's unfair to her. We're just getting the numbers in right now. But Sarah, we're nowhere near job angst, are we? And your team, Seth Carpenter, Ellen Zentner, gaping in awe. Until the job market breaks, it's a solid economy, right?
Yeah, there's nothing really concerning here in the claims data, right? Initial claims are basically low, moving sideways, which is reflecting that we're not seeing layoffs. Continued claims are trending higher, and we saw that in the report this morning, but that's just because we're not hiring as much. And so if I look at the totality of the data, labor demand seems to be solid and actually stabilizing. Into the fourth quarter, there was actually a reacceleration in labor income. And so that's really benefiting consumers and consumer spending. And that momentum is carrying through into 2025. I think the bigger question for this year, right, is labor supply, not labor demand. And that's the immigration story that we're watching very closely. Immigration was adding over 100,000 to payrolls the last 2 years. And so what does that mean for this year if we close down the border, if we have deportations? We're likely going to see a pretty sharp slowdown in payrolls because of losing that labor supply. What can that mean for wages? What can that mean for inflation? And then, as we all care about most, what does that mean for the Fed?
So given that backdrop, how do you expect the Fed to proceed this year? I mean, there's been, if you look at the warp function on the Bloomberg terminal, it's been all over the place over the past 6 to 9 months. Now I think we're, pricing in maybe a couple of rate cuts this year. But again, people seem to be all over the place. How do you guys think that's going to play out? I
mean, we still think that the Fed's going to be able to deliver about 2 cuts. Of course, we're a little bit more focused on the risk of tariffs coming earlier and curbing that. So we're a bit more long duration than perhaps what markets are pricing in right now. Right now, there's a 50% chance for a second cut. We think that can move higher to fully price in 2 cuts. Yeah, because, we're a little bit more optimistic that the inflationary effect is not going to be as aggressive and that there's going to be that negative growth effect from immigration and higher tariffs. Because right now we're seeing that consumers can't really take that much price.
I got to get this in. January flies by. We're getting near a February jobs report. Yesterday I saw a nice study of potential revisions by BLS. Model it in for us. How much does it bring it down?
Yeah, this is a huge catalyst. So probably it's going to revise down 2024 payrolls by about 86,000 a month. So bringing that number down to closer to 110 to 120,000 jobs a month.
Wow. Okay, to me, that's a wow number. Am I wrong?
No, it's going to be significant. I think that more important is probably what we see on the household survey, though, because the payroll survey, the establishment survey is being pretty muddied by this immigration story.
Fair. Okay.
What you're seeing in the revisions is that they're benchmarking to the QCEW report, which tracks initial jobless claims.
Okay, I got 30 seconds left. I got to make some news. When do we hit 5% unemployment?
Not in our base case, and I think unemployment rate could actually
Not in your base case?
Not in our base case, not even in the bear case. No, listen, if we lose labor supply from immigration, that's down on the unemployment rate.
Yep, that's right. So how do we think about this here?
I so flunked that on the exam, Paul.
I know, exactly. I mean, I don't know. It's interesting. So we have to see how that plays through, Tom, with the labor market, because people have been telling us it's been the immigration has been a big part.
So are you going to give me a 3.9 on unemployment if we get major revisions, which
Yeah, I think for February, what we're going to want to be watching is what happens to the unemployment rate. We're going to get changes to the number of people unemployed, changes to the labor force because it's re-benchmarking to new immigration numbers. We just want to know how tight the labor market is.
Great.
So we want the unemployment
Sarah,
rate number.
Well, I can see on the camera coming in. Wendy Schiller's taking notes up at Brown on this. Sarah Wolfe, thank you so much with Morgan Stanley. That was brilliant, folks. And let me tell you this. When you do labor economics, I got 2 textbooks in the hallway at home. You get to about chapter 3, you figure it's an easy A.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
you get to chapter 3 and you're like, whoa, this is hard. McKee's expert at it. I sort of talk my way through it. Sarah, thank you so much. Absolutely brilliant. I don't have a revision yet on initial jobless claims. 223 is a number Wendy Schiller and Donald Trump will like. The president speaking at 11 a.m. Wendy Schiller is next. On YouTube, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've still got futures mix, and this is after more economic data ahead of the Fed's next rate decision next week. Jobless claims came in just a bit higher than expected, but still remain at low levels. The forecast for 220,000 applications last week came in at 223,000. Still awaiting those revisions for initial jobless claims. NASDAQ futures down about 0.4%, 105 points. S&P futures down 0.1%, 6 points, and Dow futures little changed, up about 29. The 2-year yield at 4.28%. That's down 1 basis point, and the yield on the 10-year 4.62%, and that is little changed. We have Brent crude $79 a barrel, WTI crude $75 a barrel. Spot gold lower $2,737 an ounce, and the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is little changed. Companies making news: Nikkei is reporting it's no longer going to produce 4 EV models at its Mississippi plant. And then we go to Hyundai, which warned of slowing growth due to U.S. tariffs, domestic political uncertainty, as its estimates, profits missed. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. Wendy Schiller joins now from Brown University, the Taubman Center. Of course, all of her work on international relations and the civics of America. Wendy, Donald Trump, 2020 to the assembled at the World Economic Forum. Yet despite all of the cynics, I, Donald Trump, had never been more confident in America's future. I knew we were on the verge of a profound economic resurgence if we did things right, one that would generate an historic wave of investment, wage growth, and job creation. He could lift that out of the speech in 2020 to today's speech. How will he be received if it's the same song and dance?
Well, I mean, I think he's got some serious credibility. You know, he came back, he won. We know there's only one other president in the history of the country, Grover Cleveland, who's done that. And he has been decisive in a very wide-ranging and, numerous executive orders. And he is showing some presidential muscle. I think he's been restrained so far in tariffs, and I think that's a huge signal at Davos. Like, how will he use them and who will he use them against? So I think he comes in with more mojo in the international community than he did either in 2017 or 2020.
Paul, to me, she hits the heart of the matter. There's not enough discussion here. I know, 1.47%. He won. Yep. They took the House. Sure. They took the Senate. There's not enough talk about that.
Wendy, what do you think? I mean, what are some of the key things in Washington that you expect over the next several days and weeks? Is it some of these appointments, confirmation hearings? What are some of the big mileposts you're looking for this administration as it kicks off here its second term?
I'm really looking at what he's doing to literally reshape the federal government. Ronald Reagan tried a lot of different things. I've mentioned them before, but this is fairly extraordinary. I mean, things like National Science Foundation panels being canceled, National Institutes of Health being frozen. I mean, these are huge pipelines to our research and development infrastructure in the United States, which keeps us economically powerful. So, if you're going to undermine all those federal supports and pillars, where is that support going to come from? So that may not be readily apparent to everybody else, but if you start to look at what the impact could be on research and development, particularly in the tech industry, you're looking at, you're going to have to fund it. Private industry will have to fund it. Maybe they can, maybe they will. But this is a really big reshaping of the role of federal government in supporting the economy.
If those bodies walk out the door, pick whichever agency, Professor Schiller, who does he replace them with? If there's 42 people at agriculture that go out the door, where do they come from to replace those people?
I think it's going to be quite selective in terms of which of these sort of sub-agencies, sub-departments are targeted first. The red states tend to lean agriculture and need the USDA, so that's one thing. You may not have as many inspectors for our plants and our food. But, the energy, interior, I don't expect a lot of changes there. The Republican Party has declared war on higher education, from student loan forgiveness to, woke to DEI. And Trump is carrying through very, very quickly on those. And I think that's where I'm looking at sort of the immediate effects. And those will will wash into the economy. So that's what I'm looking at. How does the economy adjust? Where is the flow of people with those skills and talents come from if you shut the doors on immigration and you start sort of really beating up on universities?
Professor Schiller, one of the key topics in Davos continues to be what's happening in Ukraine. And Volodymyr Zelensky told Bloomberg yesterday that any effective peacekeeping force in his country must include U.S. troops. What do you expect Donald Trump to do as it relates to Ukraine?
Paul, I do not expect Donald Trump to put U.S. troops in any great numbers on Ukrainian soil. It's not his style, not his belief. He is, against war. He's always sort of talked about that. He doesn't want to have, U.S. spending money and possibly lives in Ukraine. But it's interesting the signals he's sending to Putin. He really feels like he's really he's the king of the mountain. And he's saying to Putin, look, we're going to stay in this for long enough to make it difficult and expensive for you. Come to the table. Let's broker a deal. Right. Let's get this done. And he has right now the kind of clout domestically and possibly internationally to try to make that happen.
Good. 30 seconds. Is there any history of Mr. Putin listening to Western leaders?
You know, the uncertainty factor with Donald Trump is a big one. And we've seen already things move when he's around. And the uncertainty factor is important. He's slammed NATO, but if he may, reverse himself on that and cause more problems for Putin from that direction. So he's so unpredictable that it would be wise for Putin to just take the phone call.
Interesting. Wendy Schiller, thank you so much. Professor Schiller at Brown University here, about 2 hours away from a speech President Trump to those gathered in Davos, Switzerland. With our news in New York City, here's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. The spotlight is on President Donald Trump this morning as he addresses the World Economic Forum in Davos. We get a preview from Bloomberg's Denise Pellegrini.
President Trump's virtual address will be piped into the main hall via a remote satellite link at 11 a.m. Wall Street time. And after his remarks, the president will be questioned by the president of the World Economic Forum, along with high-profile execs, including Bank of America CEO Brian Moynihan and Blackstone CEO Steve Schwarzman. A lot for them to ask Trump about in this 45-minute session, including his threats on tariffs and the flurry of executive orders he's signed on immigration, energy, and diversity in his first days in office. Denise Pellegrini, Bloomberg Radio.
Thank you, Denise. And again, you can catch the entire conversation at 11 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio and the Bloomberg Podcast channel on YouTube. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte in Davos, Switzerland this morning. He says that a Russian victory over Ukraine would have a costly impact on the alliance's credibility.
If Ukraine loses, then to restore the deterrence of the West, of NATO, again, it will be a much, much higher price than what we are contemplating at this moment.
NATO's Mark Rutte comments as Ukraine's President Zelensky says any effective peacekeeping force in Ukraine must include U.S. troops. Zelensky, talking to Bloomberg, is appealing to Donald Trump and China's Xi Jinping to use their influence to help in the fighting in Ukraine. Another Los Angeles County fire is driving residents from their homes. More than 30,000 residents in Castaic have been told to leave. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
It's Thursday. There's no Thursday night football. What a weekend it's going to be.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be really cool.
It's going to be some big-time football here.
You know, what do you think? I can't believe I'm saying this. The Commanders, Eagles.
I can't believe you're saying it either. Yeah.
Commanders, Eagles. I mean, Michael Barr, you saw what they did to your Lions. The guy's electric. The quarterback. I mean, he's just amazing.
Jaden, I got to give it to him. It's like, and someone compared him, and I didn't think about it, like Doug Williams years ago. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? Yeah. He is. It's like, Dougie Fresh Williams now.
So it's going to be in Philadelphia. I guess the cold will break. It's not going to be
crazy, but
it's not going to be
crazy. It's going to be fine. But the game is the Bills and the Chiefs. That's going to be the big
I want to give you a little vignette into what we do here. We celebrated the 1-year anniversary yesterday. Thank you to all for the very kind comments on it. Did you notice how all the comments were directed at Mateo?
Of course.
You and I get nothing. Nope. And the answer is, on most breaks here, we relax. Some of us have, Tito and a twist, and others of us have a Tang Mimosa. We relax. We don't do that when Jess Menton walks in the studio. A game, rocking it for 3.5 minutes on your equity markets.
Yep.
So Paul and I are going to be in intense study here, preparing for Jess Menton, because this is the strangest bull market I've seen. I got red and green on the screen. Finally, a pause, I guess. The zeitgeist is there's all this negative tone out there. That's what people don't believe it.
Weird. Hit intraday highs yesterday, all-time highs yesterday, intraday. So, it's been a good start to the year after a good 22, 23, and 24.
Afterthought got a hamster.
Oh, boy.
For the bedroom.
Not good.
It's called ATH. Yeah. She goes calling it ATH. Good morning, everyone.
You're listening to Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. It's the Equity Hour. It's like 40 years ago, Wall Street Week. The world stopped on Friday.
Yes.
For Lou Bruckheisser.
Yep, 8:30.
The world stops now on Bloomberg Surveillance worldwide, and particularly in frigid College Station, Texas. For Jess Matten joining us now, fighting Texas Aggie. And we're going to go, when I quote the VIX, the volatility index of the Standard & Poor's 500 is a measurement present and current, minute to minute. But grown-ups like you look at the guesstimate on the VIX in the future?
Right. So,
like how far out?
So basically what we're looking at
like next Wednesday?
Yeah. Well, if you look at the VIX, it's actually supposed to be over the next roughly month, so next 30 days. But we also look at what happens if there's call buying or put buying on the VIX. So right now it's below 15. It's the first time that happened this year. Obviously, we're not that far into 2025.
So that's bullish.
It is. And you're also seeing call buying just because given that it's cheaper, but then we're also in the midst of earnings season. We're going to have more of the big tech companies coming up and ramping up next week.
What do you see in people talk about? It's like swaptions, folks. No. Jess is the only one I know who looked at a payer and a received swaption and got the exam right. People like you look at what? VIX futures?
Right, that's
Discuss.
exactly. So I look at VIX futures, but then I can also look at the VIX for the NASDAQ 100. You can look at it also for the S&P 500.
What does the Mag 7 VIX say?
So actually, if you're looking at that, it's come down, and mostly it's because of what's happened with Apple. It's nearing its 200-day moving average around 220. So right now, with its earnings coming up after the bell next Thursday, especially because, remember, in the first quarter of last year, relative to the S&P 500, it's one of its worst performances this century, but then it bottomed in mid-April and took off from there. From just a technical and a price perspective, that's why you've seen that massive pull down.
Paul,
but it could bottom.
This is vital because
I know. I'm looking at.
I was saying, didn't Apple do this 90 days ago?
Yes.
I'm looking at Apple year to date, Tom. It's off 10% year to date, and over the trailing 12 months, it's only
it's because
15%.
It's because Tim Cook was in the rotunda. Continue.
Exactly. So what are you guys looking at in terms of just market breadth, market health these days?
Well, of course, everyone wants to point out whatever happens with equal weight, but we're actually, and there's a lot of data that I look at from your buddies at Bloomberg Intelligence, including Gina Martin-Adams and her team, when it comes to
They're not
earnings.
our buddies. We don't talk to them.
Their earnings estimate revisions, because obviously fourth quarter backward looking, but they're looking more, if you're looking at EPS revenue growth over the next 12 months, especially from the aggregate among sell-side strategists. So you're seeing the bar actually, if you're looking at where the S&P 500 is priced for EPS in 2025, it's north of 20%. But if you look at the bottoms-up consensus among sell-side analysts, it's around 13% as far as when we were heading into earnings season. So basically that tells you that bottoms-up estimate would have to double to justify where the S&P 500 is currently trading. So that's what Gina's really focused on right now.
Got time for one last question.
Yes.
When it's this cold, like they're skating, they're skating in the French Quarter in New Orleans.
I was just in New Orleans about a month ago.
Why am I shocked?
Yes.
In College Station, Texas.
Yes.
Are the Corps of Cadets, are they allowed to wear winter coats, or do they have to go out there, hullabaloo, Canuck, we're men, we're not going to freeze?
I believe that they do have coats that they are allowed to wear, from what I remember during my time there.
It's 29 degrees right now in College Station.
Wow.
That's chilly for our friends down there, but it's supposed to get up to the mid-50s.
Have you had snow in College Station ever?
There was, I remember one year when I was down there it did, but it was one of those things that was a complete one-off. It was very random.
You have no idea. We talked to someone from Syracuse, our tennis.
Oh, yes. Molly Smith. Yeah.
Molly Smith from Syracuse. You have no idea, Jess, the joy of the first week of March at a school like Bates up in Maine. Gosh. You know, like your LL Bean boots freeze. It's so cold.
They had snow days. We had hurricane days where I was from in South Texas because we were on the coast. It was a different dynamic.
Okay, Jess Matten, thank you. And VIX Futures as well. We're, 2 hours away here from the president speaking in Davos.
Yep.
Very importantly, folks, we're making jokes about it. It's serious. We're going to have complete coverage, and it'll be on YouTube as well, worldwide, with Paul Sweeney and Alex Steele. We need some Jess Matten music because it never goes below 40. College Station. Very much missed James Buffet.
Smell of shrimp, they begin at the bar. Wasting away again in Margaritaville, searching for my lost sugar salt.
is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
I'm sorry, it's a boom economy, and that's what we're adjusting to.
Neither party seems to want to take on deficits at all.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Stocks are coming off another record high.
And Michael Barr with news.
Tensions between the U.S. and China have heated up even more.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo in a moment with the market opening here 30 minutes away from the opening. Red and green on the screen right now. Without question, our interview of the day on how yield forces its way into the equity markets. Greg Peters, an extensive conversation coming up. Paul, yield to me a mystery right now. What do you see?
Looking at the 10-year Treasury here, Tom, 4.62% up, about 1 basis point here. But it's that range we've been hearing about, whether it's 4.25 to 4.75. Some folks say that 10-year could get up to 5%, but maybe a little bit range out here.
In a solid economy, aren't we normal right now?
It feels like it. I mean, it's not normal relative to what we're used to for the last 15 years.
We're going to go back to
almost
2%.
Zero rates. I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, 4% seems like a reasonable level.
For Global Wall Street on your morning commute, and particularly on YouTube, around the world and across this nation, Gregory Peters will join us here in a moment with PGIM. Can't say enough about his effort. We're going to do an extended conversation. We welcome all of you again on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast, growing each and every day. Did you see the little thingy YouTube sent us?
Yes, very nice.
It's like a little silver.
Yeah.
I was looking for a case of Jenny Cream Ale, but instead we got.
How to do it. They're classy.
We got this like little. Should we glue it up here where we had the orange?
The
Remember
orange.
the tape banana thing?
Exactly, for $2.8
Get $1 million.
We could do the YouTube thing behind Lisa and Michael Barr. That would look good in the studio.
Commemorating 100,000 subscribers. We're now up to about 130,000. So
yeah, it's a rate of change, folks. We started, they came to me and they said, let's do this. And I said, well, I'm not doing YouTube unless Greg Peters watches.
Yep.
And so they said, don't worry about him. We'll make it work. And bingo, it's growing each and every day. From the Interactive Broker Studios, our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
Yeah, we've got a bit of a change on Wall Street after yesterday's gains. Tech shares retreating. A big part of it, you have shares of NVIDIA supplier SK Hynix. They're falling down more than 2% in South Korea. Record quarterly results. Well, they failed to impress, so that is dragging down shares of ASML, other chip equipment stocks. So we have ASML ADRs down more than 2%. We have Broadcom down about 1%. We have NASDAQ futures down 0.4%, more than 100 points. Dow futures, little change, down 43. S&P futures, little change, down about 5. The 2-year yield, 4.29%. That's little change. And the yield on the 10-year, 4.63%. That's up about 1 basis point. We also had more economic data released. First-time applications for unemployment, well, it edged higher, but the number of Americans already on the benefit, that climbed to a more than 3-year high. To earnings, want to point out airlines because on one hand, you have Alaska Air up more than 2%, top profit estimates, but then you have American Airlines breaking that trend, reporting a surprise first quarter loss up to about 40 cents a share. Those shares down about 4%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. Last night, somebody said, wow, you got Peters coming on.
Solid.
And they said, what's PGIM? And I was flabbergasted because on Global Wall Street, PGIM is like hugely respected. This is the old Prudential.
Yep.
Remember Walter Cronkite with the Rock, Gibraltar, and all that. But PGIM is the Prudential Fixed Income wing that has gone dramatically farther, bigger, better out of Newark, New Jersey. I can't say enough about the success, and so much with all the guests they bring us, including Purcelli. I mean, he shows up every once in a while.
Yep.
Greg Peters, with his leadership in fixed income, leads the way. Greg, am I clipping a coupon, or can I dream of total return?
Thanks, Tom. I think it's a little bit of both, but you talked about before I joined back to normal. This is what normal looks like. So I think what the expectation should be is clip the coupon, earn the yield, and this is what fixed income was ultimately designed for, right? The era of zero interest rates and hoping for total return is the abnormality. This is normal.
Bronze that.
Exactly.
Okay, Paul and I, as equity guys, are just saying bronze what he just said.
Exactly. So, Greg, in the fixed income market now, it feels like I've got some options here. I mean, I can sit in a 2-year Treasury with the U.S. government, 4.3%, or I can think about taking some credit risk. Where are you guys these days?
Yeah, so, credit risk is a little more tricky. So the way I think about credit is that it's an affirmation of the growth story, meaning that credit spreads are quite tight, the richest decile that we've seen over the past, 30 years. And that basically reaffirms a strong macro, right? So the underlying economy is quite good. The corporate fundamentals equally as good. And so credit spreads reflect that. From an investing perspective, from our perspective at PGIM is, are you really getting paid for the risk and the uncertainty, and if things do go awry? And the answer is not really. So we're quite cautious on the credit side, and it's not a statement of fundamentals, it's a statement around valuations.
So, Greg, for you guys at PGIM, did you change your outlook, your philosophy, your return expectations after the election? Did anything change for you one way or the other now with the new administration coming in?
Not decidedly. I think the story that gets lost in here is that, before the election, the economy was pretty strong. So this is a very different macro environment in Trump 2.0 versus 1.0, at least from a starting place. So no, not a lot has changed. What has changed, though, is the move away from the focus around central banks and the Fed and that policy, and more around the uncertainty of government policy. And if you put it all together, I do think it has had an effect on the markets, clearly.
Right.
But from a bond market perspective, I think it has, on the margin, pushed up yields because of the concern around inflationary effects and then growth effects too. So, the big move in the bond market hasn't been around inflation. It's been around real yields. I know you love that measure, Tom.
Yeah.
And real yields are up, almost 75 basis points from the end of the third quarter. So it's been a real yield move, which comports really well to the equity story. So it's the re-rating of growth that you're seeing across the bond market and the equity market.
You can come on anytime. Greg Peters with us with PGIM. We will continue here. We welcome all of you on your commute. Huge response. College Station, Texas. Jess Menton with the fans.
She's a star down there.
Say good morning to all of you in Texas and, of course, on YouTube across the nation. After your commute, in your office, at home, YouTube, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. Greg, in my ute, a guy named John Templeton took me by my side. I was so honored. And he said in a Tennessee accent, Tom, there will be a shortage of bonds. I saw the French oat auction the other day and was flabbergasted at the interest. Greg Peters, is there a shortage of bills, notes, and bonds?
There is what we call the opposite of a shortage. So there's just a deluge. And that's what you're seeing across the globe, honestly, is that you're seeing this unrelenting supply of sovereign debt hitting the market. There's lots of chatter within the bond market around this notion of term premium, which is really, if you distill it, it is supply and demand. How much additional premium do investors require? And that's on the rise. And the reason why it's on the rise is because there is this legitimate and growing concern around the debt and deficit. And quite frankly, there's just so much supply hitting the global bond market that there has to be a repricing in term premium. So no, Sir John, we kind of have the opposite issue. The real question that we're pondering, and it doesn't seem to have any effect, is this potential crowding out effect, right? So the theory is there's just so much sovereign paper hitting the market that it crowds out corporate paper, but we haven't seen that either. So there's such a demand for fixed income securities globally that we haven't seen any sense of crowding out.
Greg, we hear a lot about U.S. exceptionalism as it relates to economic matters. How do you guys think about fixed income opportunities outside the United States?
Yeah, so I'm definitely been on this U.S. exceptionalism story. The opportunities this year are actually pretty broad, and so what's different about this year versus the previous few years, I think, is the dispersion, the disparity, and the various dislocations. So we're in a different macro than we were. So you're seeing different inflation regimes, you're seeing different growth regimes, and of course, as a response, different kind of central bank actions. So there's actually better opportunities to go global today than it's been in some time, right? So, the curves are priced differently. They should be priced differently. So, the opportunities in the UK relative to the US, relative to parts of the Eurozone at all is quite robust. It's just not one single market. It is truly a global market. And I think there's alpha to be sourced there.
Greg, maybe a Robert Tripp or Tom Perselli question, but I'll go to you on it. Do you stay up at night worried about the debt and the deficit, or do we have a growth rate that can sustain this madness?
I do worry about it. The scary part about the debt and deficit is that there's no magical number. There's no 150% debt to GDP, whatever you want to call it, and the markets wake up and say this is a problem.
Yeah.
And you're getting a whiff of it globally, right? You clearly got it from the mini budget crisis in the UK. You got it again in the UK in the fall. You're seeing it in France. So when you're in such an indebted society, these things matter. You just don't know when it matters. So I do believe that the risk on the table for the global markets, the U.S. market, is the debt and deficit. And so it's really important for policymakers to not ignore it. I know that's a double negative, but to focus on it, to say, hey, this does matter, because I do worry about the bond market taking over here. So I think this is the number one issue on the table going forward, and it just cannot be ignored.
So what are right now, where do you see just the best value in the marketplace, Greg? Because I know we've talked about, you mentioned credit spreads are so tight here. Where's value, if anywhere?
Yeah, so I do think it's back to normal, which is a carry market. So we're not looking for this fantastic full return type of marketplace. So it's about carry. And so we're building portfolios based on carry. And so we want to just own what we call kind of safe credit that just rolls down the curve, clip the coupon, not take a tremendous amount of credit risk, just because we don't think we're getting paid for it. Structured products is an area that really fits that bill well. And then, even though we're tactical, but if you kind of zoom out and think about what fixed income does in an overall asset allocation scheme, it is the protective measures, right? And so if the world does, go pear-shaped, if things don't play out fundamentally as we think, having duration in a balanced portfolio is critically important and really helpful. So we really think there's scope for that in a balanced way. And so that's where we see the value.
Very cool. Greg, we're going to zoom in and know. We see this on YouTube, folks. Gregory Peters with Arsenal merch in the office. Yeah, Greg, do they have a chance of catching Liverpool here? What do you think?
I don't think so, Tom, but I think they're better positioned than the Tots, as you affectionately call them.
The Tots are on the edge of relegation. Get out. Did you know, Paul, they call the standings the tables?
The tables?
The tables, as if you're informed. You look at the NFL tables or that. The Tots are on the edge of relegation. It's an outrage to say the least. Greg Peters, thank you, with PGIM. I learned a lot there. That was really wonderful. I can't say enough, folks, how younger people are going. We need a John Williams market to get us back to a 2%.
Okay.
We're not negative yields.
Right.
But lower yields. Bob Michael over at JP Morgan's big on, a vector towards lower yields.
Sure.
And others are saying, hey, this is normal.
Yep. It is. This seems, I mean, you get a 10-year Treasury, 4.6%. Anything in that 4 to 5% range is kind of where we've been.
Should we do a data check?
Sure.
Wicked. Well, wicked is wicked out in Hollywood. With our news in New York City, here's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. President Trump takes center stage in Davos this morning. Trump will be addressing the world's financial elite by video link. Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern.
What's going to be interesting is the Q&A portion of this. Now, these aren't journalists, and these are likely people that want to curry favor with the 47th president or those that already have. I'm thinking of Steve Schwartzman, so that's likely going to be a softball question. But potentially we can hear things like deregulation, what these tariffs and trade may look like, especially from Anna Botin of Santander, or what the energy landscape may look like in the United States from someone like Patrick Pouyanné from Total.
Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern. You can catch the entire conversation at 11 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio and the Bloomberg Podcast YouTube channel. Meanwhile, according to President Trump, the Federal Emergency Management Agency has not been doing their jobs for the past 4 years when it comes to disaster relief.
FEMA is going to be a whole big discussion very shortly because I'd rather see the states take care of their own problems.
Trump spoke with Sean Hannity on Fox News last night. Firefighters are battling to maintain the upper hand on a huge and rapidly moving wildfire that swept through rugged mountains north of Los Angeles. Los Angeles County Sheriff Robert Luna.
Several helicopters and airplanes are hitting this fire really hard, so I'm hoping that stops the forward progress of the fire and nobody loses their homes.
The fire comes as parched Southern California could get some badly needed rain this weekend. Finally, after delays due to the Los Angeles area fires, the 97th Oscar nominations were announced this morning. Nominees for Best Actor: Adrien Brody, Timothée Chalamet, Coleman Domenico, Ralph Fiennes, and also Sebastian Stan. The nominees for Best Actress are, I should say Fiennes, I'm sorry. The nominees for Best Actress, there we go. I'm killing it, all right. Demi Moore, Cynthia Erivo, Mikey Madison, Carla Sofia
Just
Gaston.
for a moment, I thought it was entertainment tonight. You're doing better than me, Michael. Let's go to surveillance Oscar correspondent. What are you wearing today, Lisa?
Wait a minute, I got to do Best Picture.
Okay, excuse me.
All right, and Fernando Torres also in there. Nominees: Best Picture, Nora the Brutalist, A Complete Unknown. I can.
Yeah, you and I are the complete unknown.
Conclave, Dune Part 2, Amelia Perez, I'm Still Here, maybe. Nickel Boys, The Substance, and Wicked.
Lisa, discuss.
Oh, save us.
I've seen none of those films.
That's what I'm thinking about, because last year you had, Oppenheimer, big name movie, big bucks at the box, big, money at the box office, and now you have these other films who you don't really hear of coming out.
But how about Demi Moore getting nominated? And she won the Golden Globe.
And she did after
her career.
A great acceptance speech, and I think that's also gonna help boost her. She had a phenomenal acceptance speech.
Okay. Who votes? Like it's like people that are actually in the. It's like sort of like Baseball Hall of Fame. It's like actually people in the industry.
That's right. That's right.
I'm
By the way,
fascinated.
Mr. Ray Fiennes, you were in my favorite movie quiz show.
Oh,
Don't ask me, man. I'm sorry. I'm sending you a basket of fruit and candy, man.
So there you go.
Dune Part 2, I have not seen.
No.
I've seen one of these. I'm not going to say which one. Nobody cares.
I haven't seen, no.
I've seen one. Which one should I watch this weekend? I guess A Complete Unknown is about one B. Dillon in Greenwich Village, right?
Yep. And the Golden Globe winner for Best Picture was
Brutalist.
Brutalist.
The Brutalist, which I haven't seen too.
Well,
Which is
I'm a
barely
huge
out.
Adrien Brody fan. He's good.
I think it's like barely released in America.
Well, it's like 3.5 hours. It's very long.
Hey, they got to do this with Conan O'Brien and the fires today. I've been remiss, folks. We should have Rob Caroline. The fires, as we speak, are back.
Yep.
But it was just yesterday that we were talking about, hey, we're going to have precipitation, everything's going to be fine. And I'm like, hours after that, another one flared up.
Yeah, so hopefully they'll get some rain this weekend and that'll help. But it's just tough out there. But
NFL $5 million donation to all that's going on.
Who did that?
I saw a couple other major donations as well from Hollywood heavyweights, and it's going to be an original year. Lisa Mateo will give you complete, total coverage here of the Oscars.
Correctly pronounced, too, unlike someone else.
Unlike, us.
Okay.
You did better than I would have, Michael, as well. We are an hour and a half away from an important speech. It is an important speech because of what we've witnessed over the last 4, 5, 6 days. Paul, this isn't like a normal Davos speech.
No, I mean, it is the second administration for President Donald Trump, and he's been talking a lot about tariffs and international relations. So here's an opportunity to speak to some of the world leaders that are gathered in Davos, and I'm sure there's a lot of expectation to what he will say.
Yeah, I just want to get this up. I just got it up on the screen here, the Bloomberg Professional Service. Marilyn and Jeffrey Katzenberg, they donated $5 million to the people crushed by the fire. Somehow I think we'll see a lot more of those. Michael Barr, thank you so much for that penetrating Oscar discussion once a year. From New York, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this Bloomberg Business Flash is brought to you by IBKR. Will the average U.S. temperature in January 2025 be greater than 34 degrees? Well, you can trade your prediction at Interactive Brokers. Buy yes if you agree, no if you don't. Correct answers earn $1. Go to IBKR.com/forecast. All right, well, you have the rally on Wall Street showing signs of slowing. This is after the S&P 500 closed near a record yesterday thanks to strong earnings reports. Also optimism over AI. But this morning we're seeing this pullback in tech because yesterday you had shares of companies linked to President Trump's AI endeavor, Stargate, they were higher. But this morning you have Oracle down nearly 2%, NVIDIA down more than 1%, and ARM down more than 4%. NASDAQ futures down 0.5%, 117 points. S&P futures down 0.1% or 7 points. Dow futures little changed, up about 39. The 2-year yield 4.31%. That's little change, and the yield on the 10-year 4.65%, and that's up 3 basis points. And we are under 2 hours away from President Trump's video appearance at the World Economic Forum in Davos, but some of the world leaders, top executives attending, they could be dragging their feet, and that's because Jamie Dimon had a blowout party there last night. Bloomberg has it right. I was at the Kirchner Museum. We're talking champagne flowing and even getting to take pictures with Dimon and other J.P. Morgan executives. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
It is a serious event because everyone goes. The floor, I've been there many, many times. Good morning, Jacob Frenkel and Mr. Dimon, and usually greeted by Mr. Blair of the United Kingdom. And Mary Erdos is there, always lovely, and Mr. Pinto. And first of all, the art is spectacular. You wander around. But the reason it's such a big party, which was not captured in the wonderful story, is because the food in Davos is terrible.
Oh,
why?
No.
I used to fly home, take my suitcase directly to the Carlisle, put my suitcase in the room and go in and have a steak at the bar at the Carlisle Hotel, because it was the first decent food I'd eaten in like 5 days, 6 days.
Why
is
it
no flavor?
I have no idea. It's it's up Happy Valley. It's the highest, and like I'm sitting there trying to get a decent slice of pizza in Davos, and it's gotten a little better over the years. But J.P. Morgan flies everything in, and everyone knows it's the only place you're actually going to eat for 4 days, and that's That made me Mary.
That's the inside scoop.
People
there.
think they're going to see Jamie Dimon. Mary Erdos is in charge of the horse divorce.
Yep.
And that's the way it works. Eric emails in. He's upset. He's a young stud. He's like 4 eggs a day.
Mm-hmm.
Eggs from the COVID bottom are up 206%, 22% per year. I mean, it's
all because of this flu thing.
No, I don't know. Lisa, do you think it's just the flu?
No, it is. That's basically from the flu, and that's why the bird flu. That's why they have those prices up. But at least they have eggs in the shelves because they didn't have them.
Okay. Joining us now, monitoring egg prices with a granularity only she can deliver. Anna Wong, of course, Victory Lap here for 2024, looking at the labor economy and such. Anna, when your team looks at something as granular as egg prices, how do you fold that into your work?
Oh, we definitely do look at egg prices, and we look at also fertilizer prices too. So, Tom, one interesting thing is that fertilizer prices could push food prices up in about 6 to 7 months, and we have been seeing fertilizer prices up for 6 or 7 months now. So, thinking about bird flu's impact and also just orange. We even look at orange production from Florida. And this year, orange, grapefruit, tangerines production is going to be down 10% in the United States. So it's not just eggs. It's also other things, other fruits, orange juice probably also. And those food items account for about 2% in the CPI. Which is basically about as high as the LA OER, or owner's rent equivalent of the Los Angeles County, and a CPI. So you can think that, basically food and wildfire are about has the same weight in CPI.
Tell me about the weighting of food in America versus rent or mortgages or housing. Is food a small part of what we look at in CPI?
Yes. So the total food is about, I believe, 7 or 8%. But groceries, which would be called food away, food at home, would be about 2 or 3%. Whereas shelter accounts for about 33%, a third of the weight on the CPI.
3% versus 30. Yep, we're looking at eggs in this. Eric, I'm sorry, eggs are like a big deal if you're having 6 a day. He's like Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's popping a protein. Anna Wong with us here. Dr. Wong will continue with us after we get the market open for the first time, I guess, since the inauguration. I got a little red on the screen, but I don't want to oversell that. The VIX 15.12 with a complete report. Lisa Mateo.
You've got it, and we'll see how things kick off this morning on Wall Street with the S&P 500 right now down about 0.1%, down 9.6077. We have the Dow little changed, up about 25 at 44,187, and then we'll go to the Nasdaq, last and final right now, down about 0.5%, 97 points at 19,909. We have the 2-year yield at 4.30%. That's little changed, and the yield on the 10-year 4.66%, and that's up about 5 basis points. We'll take you to commodities next. We have Brent crude $79 a barrel, WTI crude $75 a barrel, and we have spot gold at $2,744 an ounce. Finally, to currencies, the Bloomberg dollar spot index is little change. The Japanese yen up about 0.1%. The euro, British pound, little change. We have Bitcoin down about 1.5%, but over 102,000. That is your Bloomberg opening bell report. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks. The Dow, Paul, 1.4% from ATH.
Yeah, I know.
That's what the pros say.
Exactly.
ATH.
And we just, on the NASDAQ, I noticed we were just above 20,000 at the open. Then we're down 9,000.
I got to order eggs. I'm going to get some of the fancy blue eggs. Why don't you talk to Anna Wong?
Anna Wong, you guys have your GDP model there at Bloomberg Economics. When you input these tariffs that President Trump is talking about, what does that do to your GDP forecast?
So the tariff, we do have a shock model, and for people who have terminal, you can just go to BICO models and go to shock, and where you can simulate a shock to credit spreads and trade flows, which is where I think a trade policy uncertainty will enter general equilibrium. Basically, it will affect investment because more uncertainty, more volatility of not knowing where tariffs would be tends to dampen business fixed investment. And so you could input that in the shock model, and then it spits out, GDP number. But where I really looked for in the GDP number is I want to know how the Fed thinks about it. And in the Fed's model, the one standard deviation shock in trade policy uncertainty can knock off about, I want to believe that it's a couple tenths of a percentage point of GDP. Not spectacularly big, but still probably a bit of a dent. So if you think the trend potential GDP is going at 2.5%, this trade shock could knock it down to maybe 2.1 or 2.2%.
And for those playing at home here, SHOK is the terminal function to get to the shock.
SHOK.
Yeah, for
You're a
shock.
font of wisdom.
It's very cool. I just looked it up, and it's. I'm going to play around with this because you can make some changes to any kinds of economic data points here in terms of inputs. So, Anna, let's step back here. I mean, what's the biggest issue from this new administration that you're going to be paying attention to in the coming days and weeks?
Yeah, I think one surprise from the inauguration address is the lack of immediate tariff announcement, which is good news for financial markets. However, I think that relief for people who are feeling relief, thinking that maybe the administration is going to take a more temperate and deliberate approach, I think that relief is too premature. Trump also mentioned that he's looking into creating the External Revenue Service Department. So if there is going to be a whole new External Revenue Department, it means there's going to be external revenues. And our calculation is that for tariff revenues to be about $200 billion per year, you basically need the average U.S. tariff to go from the current 3% to at least about 9 to 10%.
Okay. And I got to run. I'm sorry. We got breaking news. Anna Wong, thank you so much. Our chief U.S. economist. It's absolutely fabulous 2024. Best of luck, particularly on the American economy next year. You know, I looked at Dragon Age, Paul.
I know you did.
And the Veil guy, Rook. It just didn't. I mean, Rook was the same as before, but it just didn't have the same pop as Inquisition. I mean, it's all there is to it.
I know you're an avid gamer here. The stock really taking on the chin here today. Electronic Arts, EA is the ticker, Tom, down about almost 15%. That's a 52-week low. And this is a pretty big company. It's $32 billion market cap.
Some way to the NASDAQ, off 0.5% right now. Green on the screen for the Dow. The VIX 14.99. The markets are open. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on YouTube around the world.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Well, we've got stocks pretty much taking a breather after a sell-off in chip makers around the world, and that really started with SK Hynix. Shares falling down more than 2% in South Korea after record quarterly results really failed to impress, and that's affecting others. ASML, their ADRs down this morning more than 1%. You have Broadcom, they're lower this morning, also down more than 1%. ASML actually down 3%, and NVIDIA down about 1.5%. So we go to the NASDAQ, down 0.3%. 0.5%, 68 points. The S&P 500, little change, down 3. The Dow, down up about 0.2%, up 87 points. The 2-year yield, 4.29%. That's little change. And the yield on the 10-year, 4.64%, and that's up about 3 basis points. And the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is little changed. Stocks on the move. The shares of video game company Electronic Arts, you were just talking about it. Yeah, their shares down 16%, cut its full-year outlook. Slowing demand for the soccer games. People just don't want to play them as much. Yeah. And attention, young entrepreneurs. A new study has listed the best cities in the U.S. to start your business. The top spot is Jacksonville, Florida. The best in cost of living. Really? That's followed by Tampa, the best internet speed of any city. And lastly, it goes to Indianapolis. That is coming in third. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa Mateo, thank you so much. Huge response when Charles Tan ducked into the door a number of weeks ago. The American Century Investments here in fixed income. But first, we got to do an audible. Tan walks in. He goes, the brown eggs at Costco are killing. Joining us now, surveillance Costco correspondent Lisa Mateo. So I can waltz into Costco and buy 5 dozen eggs like everyone does that?
I just did this past weekend. You have to stop.
How do you get them home without breaking them?
They come in like it's a 2-stack case, and it's huge, and you have to. It comes wrapped in. And it's the best deal out there.
Do you guys eat eggs every day, every meal? What are you guys doing?
I do. It's you gotta have the protein.
I've been worried about I have to stop, but I'm loving eggs. Well, I got to be quick here, Charles Tan. Brown or white eggs at Costco?
Well, I prefer brown, but it's hard to find them these days at a Costco.
Okay, thank you for that. It's the first time in the history of American Century they've did an egg talk.
Yep.
Fixed income. We did a lot on this today. How hard is your business to make the year's performance? How hard is it to look forward into 2025?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, fixed income as an asset class has come back to life, right? After, 4 or 5 years of a zero interest rate. So, looking across the curve, we just talk about, 2-year, treasury at 4.2 and a 10-year at 4.6. For the treasury yields coming back in the 4% range feels a lot better. And so looking across opportunities said, and the one thing we need to be mindful is that because so much demand flowing into fixed income, credit spreads have been very, very tight. So the generic sort of a corporate credit, whether it's an IG or high yield, is not that very attractive. So what we decided to do really is to look at, where other opportunities we can find off the beaten path.
So where do we go off the beaten path? Is that agencies, mortgage-backed securities, that type of thing?
Yeah, I would say, if you look at by sector, the securitized structured credit market looks more interesting than the bond market, the corporate bond market. And MBS is a place actually we are overweighting. The reason for that is, you can get in a current coupon, MBS bonds around like 130, 40 basis points over Treasury, compared to IG corporate bond is probably only like a 92, 95 basis points over. And that is on average single A, triple B. To me, MBS looks a lot more attractive. But there are probably even better places to invest than MBS. Because one of the key risks about MBS is the extension risk. When rates go up, MBS prices go down.
Mm-hmm. Is there credit risk to mortgage-backed securities?
Not, for the MBS part of the world, right? That is underwritten by Fannie and Freddie.
So they're insured or government supported going in?
There is implicit, but it's a very, very high quality.
Right. So how about in the new issue market? It seems like every time, I don't know, just look at the banks. Every time JP Morgan, Bank of America, they report earnings, the next day they're out in the market with new issuance. Do you guys pick up the phone when they call?
We do. We participate in the new issue market, and we look at every deal that comes along, but we don't oftentimes participate in many of them because we find, the credit spreads, the risk of premium, so to speak, is not very attractive. We instead, go off the beaten path. For example, some of the bonds we've been buying is in, the Pemex, Mexico,
yep.
Petro County, and 2-year bonds yielding like 8%, 8.5%. To me, that's far more interesting.
Do you know you're going to get your money back with Pemex at 8% for 24 months? You kidding me? Sounds like a free lunch.
That's exactly right. So one of the things that we found is very interesting is that I used to work at Moody's, rating corporate bonds, and we give company the same rating, whether it's a 10-year bond or a 2-year bond. But if you think about in terms of the probability of getting paid back, right. A 2-year bond in theory should be upgraded to AAA or AA instead of single B, right? So what I would be focused on today's market is the front end safer yields, safer spreads, and we find them in shorter corporate bonds. We find them in shorter structured bonds, such as in the front cash flow, non-agency.
Can mere mortals buy these bonds? Paul's taking notes over here, I noticed.
Yeah.
8% 2-year?
8% 2-year, to me, that's very, very attractive, right? Even though, Pemex is rated like a, split, right? Average like a double B.
Too short a visit. Don't be a stranger. Love having you here. Charles Tan today. I just learned that white eggs and brown eggs, there's no difference.
I don't know.
I didn't know that.
A couple eggs, we're good.
Okay, well, I'm learning every day. What
Free
can
range.
I say? Red and green on the screen, the Dow up 110 points. With our news in New York City, and he's Oscar-free, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. President Trump takes center stage in Davos this morning. Trump will be addressing the world's financial elite by video link. Bloomberg's Amy Morris brings us a preview of what global Wall Street is expecting.
People are optimistic in pockets.
New York Stock Exchange President Lynn Martin at Davos says most everyone there is already optimistic about the Trump administration, but they do have some questions.
The geopolitical landscape is probably the biggest one, tariffs in particular, and obviously the knock-on effect of questions around tariffs is going to be inflation.
The forum says President Trump will address the gathering. That will be followed by a dialogue. Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
Thank you, Amy. You can catch the entire conversation at 11 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio and the Bloomberg Podcasts YouTube channel. Fire crews are making progress on blunting the threat from an enormous new blaze north of Los Angeles. The Hughes fire has expanded to more than 10,000 acres and beyond. Los Angeles County Fire Sheriff Robert Luna.
We have approximately 31,000 people who are affected by our evacuation orders, another 23,000 that are impacted by evacuation warnings.
The fire comes as parched Southern California to get some badly needed rain this weekend. Bitterly cold temperatures from New York to the U.S. South will start to moderate by this weekend after straining power grids, snarling transportation, and bringing snow to the shores of the Gulf of Mexico. In Manhattan, readings will approach 40 degrees this weekend from 18 degrees this morning. In Houston, readings will swing from 33 to 64 over the same time frame. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael, thanks. So Paul Sweeney leaned over to me 3 years ago. He says, Tom, GE Aerospace at 48, buy it.
Buy it.
It's a forple.
It's a forple, $205. I mean, it's GE, the same ticker GE, Tom, that we all grew up with.
But it's the sexy stuff.
It's the aerospace stuff. Doing business as GE Aerospace is kind of what the DES function shows you here. And boy, the stock has doubled in the last year. Put out some good numbers today.
Can Henry Lawrence Culp Jr. go be secretary of the whatever for the Trump administration?
Help out here.
Mr. Culp, out of Danaher, over to GE, another home run for Larry Culp.
When he joined, we had Karen Ubelhart from Bloomberg Intelligence in here, who's known Larry Culp for decades, and said, this is big for GE. This is exactly what GE needs is Larry Culp. He will clean this thing up. He will tighten it up, and he'll give the street a good message that they can jump on. And boy, was she right.
There we are. GE. We'll get Karen on here again with Bloomberg Intelligence. Warming up. How about the ice in New Orleans? Extraordinary. This album was recorded in the heart of the French Quarter. It's next block. Excuse me. I was getting ahead of I'm so excited about the Oscars.
Yeah.
I can barely. Cy, which movie should I see? Tell me. I don't want it.
My favorite.
What about Wicked? Wicked. Everybody in the control room's seen Wicked, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You can just see. Lisa, have you seen Wicked?
No, my daughter has raves about it, but I will not be seeing that.
Oscar correspondent Lisa Mateo saving me. Bloomberg surveillance.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene, 1 hour away from a really important discussion. Paul Sweeney and Alex Steele will bring that to you critically on YouTube as well. I saw David Gurr up in the food court. He was listening to Mighty Poplar. And I said, let's stop it. Listen to Molly Tuttle and the Golden Highway and keep it there. Because he's all bluegrass.
I know.
They're
It's a
not
good
going to be
suggestion.
listening to bluegrass in Davos.
No.
David Gurr, the president's going to come out. Help me here. Based on the last 4 days' Gurr interpretation, shall the president lecture the assembled in Davos?
I think that we will get a victory lap, as you like to say, a kind of winding speech to begin with, and then we'll have a few questions from notable chief executives, including Brian Moynihan, I assume about the U.S. economy and tariffs and energy. But I watched the Sean Hannity interview last night. He, the president, is thrilled with how things have gone, obviously, and still has some grievances he wants to take care of. I suspect we'll see some of that. It's not going to be the formal speech that I know you saw back in 2018, Tom, or in 2020 when we went to Davos, and there was that kind of uneasy Donald Trump reading from the prompter, recognizing the fact that he was a bit of a bull in a china shop there. And as we've seen in all of these interviews over the course of the week, he is being more warmly welcomed, and I expect that to continue over this kind of virtual transom to the White House.
Piano bar one night late.
They piped it in.
And the president was there with his entourage. It was just a whole different vibe. I'm kidding.
So,
just trying to get a rumor going.
He's not kidding about the piano bar.
No. So, David, we've seen just from the inauguration, corporate America, namely the tech industry, really kind of cozying up to President Trump. Is he going to get that same kind of response from some of the attendees in Davos, do you think?
It seems like he will. And, we saw those tech executives surrounding him in Washington, and, a handful of them have made the trip from Washington to Switzerland. But, again, what we've heard from all of these executives across sectors is a new kind of optimism, or a sense that there's more clarity to this administration. Of course, everyone you've talked to says the same thing about appetite for deal making and lesser regulations. I think that that's kind of the zeitgeist that he's coming into there. So we saw Javier Milei talk to John Micklethwaite yesterday. He delivered a speech today, the Argentine president, and it's a similar message, which is, you kind of laughed at me or rolled your eyes or thought I was totally off base the last time I was here. Look at what's happened politically since then. Here we are.
But come on, Anna Botan of Santander.
Also questioning him too, yes.
Within continental Europe, he has to address the timeline of tariffs. Like he must do that today, right?
It's funny how we're living this again, which is he'll say something off the cuff, and that sets everything in motion, and everyone wondering what's going to happen. Yes, I think that Anna Botin would say that. Please tell me the date now, or what's your plan for this? And we have February 1st floated, but I think we all know now.
Right.
He could say one thing and reverse it in 5 minutes, and that's just where we are and what we're living.
Thanks, David. Nobody cares. David Gurr with us here as we get ready for the president. We now turn to Oscar late in the morning correspondent Alex Steele. What do you think, Alex, of the Oscar
I have no idea. I haven't seen any of these movies.
None of us watch. I saw this. I saw the Sonic 3 movie. That's the kind of film treatment that I'm taking.
We both have young kids. But B, it's not like you go to the movies and you see that like one-hit wonder, right? Like you get it on Netflix. You're getting it on Amazon. It's like I don't know where to find these movies.
I saw one of them. I'm not going to say which one. It doesn't matter what I think. But I think so many people, Alex, so like you, we had Lisa is our surveillance correspondent. Who's got the time to watch them?
You 100% saw Wicked.
But
let's not deny that was the movie you're talking about. I did see Wicked.
Did you?
I did.
Ariana destined?
Yeah. I mean, what?
Destined for a trophy?
Oh, no.
I don't know.
I don't think so.
My daughter's excited for
so?
the sequel. I guess it's like a built-in sequel, right? It ends halfway through.
Another 3 hours.
So
another 3 hours.
Anyway.
I mean, I have a 10-year-old, so of course we saw Wicked.
Okay, let's do. We got 30 seconds left between the two of you. Top tick the concessions at the movies this year.
Oh,
wait,
we go to the same theater.
Wait, did you go to Nighthawk?
We go to Nighthawk.
I mean,
which
truffle
Tom
butter
knows
popcorn.
well, where there's truffle butter popcorn, but also these like $30 cocktails that you can get, and you have. I mean,
really?
You're seeing Moana
what?
too. You've got to get the themed cocktail.
The Nighthawk is a theater in Brooklyn for all the hip parents.
Where you
And
can get
Williamsburg.
food. Yeah, and Williamsburg.
But the food's really good. The drinks are really good.
How
If
much
you're
have
seeing
you,
Sonic
Alex,
3.
how much have you spent at the Nighthawk with family?
It's like a domestic.
Oh,
$100 bucks?
It's like a flight.
it's like $120 for 3 people.
Yeah,
Hands
20 a
down.
ticket. No discount for kids.
Do they
No.
serve martinis?
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
sir.
Yes!
If you're going to pay that $15 for
Thank
that
you.
cocktail in Brooklyn.
Thank you, David Gurr and Alex Steele, Brooklyn correspondents for Bloomberg Surveillance. It was cold in New Orleans, an iconic album from there, Christopher Whitley.